of the darkness, out of the fear. Here comes the monster waiting in there. Heart rate is rising, some call it scared. You'll feel the chill start raising your hairs.
It's too late, you're here now. I hope that you're prepared, cause there's no getting out. You can feel the energy, dark like a cloud. Electrified by panic, terror and doubt. Don't cross me or you'll learn quick the hard way that I'm not one to mess with. I got a mind and that mind's full of mean tricks. I'll plant a seed in your red where the fear will stick.
And I'll haunt your nightmares. Little did you know that I like fear. When you turn, I'll be right there. You should be afraid, you should be scared. We're all alone, you're on your own. It's you and me, who's going home? Look up, cause I'm right here. Welcome to a real life nightmare. Possess all your dreams. A demon preys on the weak. You better watch out for me. Mistakes were made, you will see. You should've never crossed me, cause now you'll never stop me. Revenge was my calling. Now you're a dead man walking. And I'll haunt your nightmares. Little did you know that I like fear. When you turn, I'll be right there. You should be afraid, you should be scared. We're all alone, you're on your own. It's you and me, who's going home? Look up, cause I'm right here. Welcome to a real life nightmare.
Yeah. Please tell me that I can't, that I won't, that I fail, that I'll never make it out, yeah. Please tell me all the bad, never good, fill my head full of every single doubt, yeah. Please say any negative thoughts, I pop off when I hear people say I cannot. I get off to the thought of proving everyone wrong, I won't stop to the top, so you better back off and get lost. I'ma stay loud, stay proud, never running out, never heading south. I'll be spreading out, call it word of mouth, can't put me down, I'll be getting loud. You can have your doubts, not what I'm about, have your fucking clout. It be raining now, I keep making sound, go another round, bitch I'm legend bound, can't stop me now.
You don't wanna fuck with me. A slow burn like a disease. Just tell me that I can and I'll show you things that you couldn't believe. Just tell me that I can. Just tell me that I can. Just tell me that I can. Just tell me that I can.
Anything negative, cause I just wanna hear it out your mouth, yeah. Give me fuel, it's a tool that I use to go ahead and run my fucking mouth, yeah. I take shots, I take loss, I make shots, I miss lots. I thought you get big boss, you get yachts, you swing lots and pop off a big shot. I ain't done chasing, got big dreams, bigger things, impatient. Who's at the top think they need replacement? Who's at the top think I'm gonna erase them? Face it, I don't give up quick, I don't give up shit, I won't give up this. Cause I know that I want it, know that I'm on it, I'll make it, I promise.
You don't wanna fuck with me. A slow burn like a disease. Just tell me that I can and I'll show you things that you couldn't believe. Just tell me that I can. Just tell me that I can. Just tell me that I can. Just tell me that I can.
Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to a special episode of an impromptu truth with Reddit author Joshua Waggoner. What is going on, brother? Welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Yep, and we have a special guest appearance by Mr. Will Cut, almost as big as almost as big of a fan as I am. What's going on, Willie Cut? Where you at tonight?
Man, I'm in Pigeon Forge at a hotel.
Nice. Is it cold down there?
Yeah, it's cool. Should have got a cabin though.
All right. So we're gonna run through roll call real quick. You know how we do around here. All right. So Dave, why you got both profiles in here, man? All right. So the artist, what's going on? Lorna, Mr. G. Hold on. Why did I have to report somebody? Bryce, what's good? Bryce has been listening too. Aaron Paulus, welcome to the show. Larry, Hound Dog, Larry and Candace. I saw Scorpion up in here. Who else we got up in here? I see 19 people watching. Guys, we're friendly over here. Say hi. Tontello. Sorry if I'm mispelling that. Mispronouncing that. Mr. Joshua Marshall, how you doing? Welcome. And
Chaos is
everybody
here.
else who wants to say hi, say hi. Oh, what's going on, Mr. Chaos? How you doing, brother? Guys, we're going to be talking... like you've heard me, Wilcott, and Bass talk about for the past few shows, there's these Reddit stories, and it's called the Worstverse, and I honestly think it's some of the best writing on Reddit, and I felt the need to reach out to the author, and I hoped he would say yes, because you never know, but he did say yes, and now we could find out what the inspiration behind the Worstverse was, and how he developed the characters for a lot of these characters we all know. Captain Hook, Dracula, we all know these characters, and the way he has them arced in this story is absolutely amazing. And I like every time Nature's Temper puts out a new one, I'm sending messages like, yo, they put out the new episode, they put out the new story. All right, so if you guys have all right, so we'll start off with the first one. All right, we got a question right here from, where's the comments? We'll start off with the comments first. We got a question from Aaron Paulus asking, Joshua, are you and Mophius ending the Worstverse?
No. That's there's a lot of confusion about that. Because the what you see a lot of people on the Nature's Temper channel specifically really is they think that she started it because Cerber was on there first, but I was already like writing and uploading and doing all of my stuff on Dr. Cupid's channel a good ways before that, and then I just talked to her one day and was like, hey, I want to mention Cerber as like a tongue-in-cheek reference in these stories, and it ended up becoming a crossover thing. And then that's kind of how I Ride for Sober started, and that's how those stories ended up moving over to Nature's Temperance channel. But I was already well underway doing the Worstverse stuff a long time before that happened. And the end of the road thing is just specifically like no more Cerber story. That's why I don't even put Cerber in the thumbnail art anymore when I do it. Is it's getting away from being a Cerber story because originally it was never intended to be. It was like
Okay.
part of it was the story that I was setting up with Can't Stop, Don't Want to Either, and If It's the Last Thing I Do. Those were the two foundational stories of that plot, and then it got reworked into a version of Cerber, which we were talking about doing a collaboration, doing like a food delivery version of it, and that never really happened until she went on that first long hiatus. So I just kind of like did this mock version of that and sent it to her and was like, here, maybe this will cheer you up, just get you motivated or something. And she ended up sending that straight to Temper and getting him to narrate it. And then I was like on my heels trying to catch up for that whole first season. And reworking that into a Cerber story where it was never originally intended to. Originally, he was going to start immediately working for Sobek. And so that would have been condensed into a lot smaller story. But when you add Cerber to it, you get this much longer thing that gets drug out a whole lot more, and you have to navigate around that. The whole end of the road thing is just the end of the Cerber stories. It's the last arc before all of those stories come together
Converge.
and continue. And then once that's over, we have the new ones that, like, I have the Patreon thing where I've been posting the first part of the new series of stories
Okay.
on like, at certain points. Like when the first one went up, I posted what was it? We Deal in Dreams, and then the 10th one I posted. Which one was it? It was the first Tales of Haley Handiwork, and then the last one I'm going to post when this is over is Where Monsters Play, which circles around Sobek's water park and like what goes on in there and all the stuff that it actually is aside from just being like a theme park and all the purposes it serves outside of that and like little different looks into the paranormal world. So that's
Okay.
how we're moving towards that direction as opposed I'm not ending it, but that's how we're moving away from these plots.
So like the character Adeline won't be so much in the future stories.
Yeah. Yeah, once like this story essentially concludes once Jose's tenure with Cerber is up. So that's how that all comes to an end. And
Okay.
then we move on to how that all converges.
Okay. So uh let's backtrack. I want to start at the beginning. I believe you started writing these stories 5 years ago.
Um
From what I looked at from your Reddit page that I looked at, it might have been earlier than that, but
yeah, I think it's been
as far as
closer to
Reddit posted.
5.5 now, maybe a little over.
So you started out with werewolves are assholes,
Yes.
right? How did that one come about?
Like the last lines of that story are literally the idea for that story. Because it starts like most good stories start with you just talking with your friends about random crap,
Hmm.
and that's what we were talking about at the time. Like for real, don't screw around. If you were a werewolf, what would you really do with it? And then you start thinking of like, what could you really do, realistically speaking, and not end up in a government lab somewhere. And I was like, there's only so many things you can do, and
Be an
given my
asshole.
personality, yeah, I'm going to go out into the woods and make an ass of myself. And so that's kind of how that all started. Because and like it was set in the backwoods because when I had that conversation, like we were at my friend Matt's house in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, which is like you like paranormal stuff. A lot of people that one of the most haunted places in the U.S. So much so it made it into Supernatural, where they're like, "Hey, we need a bunch of ghosts quick." Goodlettsville. And there's all kind like I need to connect you with him because just listening to the stories that happened at his house,
Hmm.
oh, you would love it. So we're sitting out there in the middle of these woods talking about it, and I'm like, so that became the setting. It's like way out in the middle of the woods of Tennessee, where they're all isolated and stuff, and you never really know what you might run into. And that's kind of how that all started. I was like, I'm either gonna be some kind of weird half-ass superhero, or I'm just gonna run around in the woods just making an ass of myself and just traumatizing random campers. And that's kind of how that popped up. It just seemed like something really fun to do, and like, in that situation, taken to its logical conclusion, what would you really do if you were suddenly this person who could turn into a 7 or 8 foot tall wolf monster? Your options are really limited there, realistically speaking. So I was like, well, let's do that, because we've never really seen that, and that's kind of just, I was like, well, let's do it. Let's see what comes of it.
So how did you develop the way they transform? Like they have to pack on so much of that weight.
That's kind of like basic biology. That's like a grievance you see with a lot of like science communicators and stuff that see these transformations where the mass comes from. It just seems, and biologically speaking, that has to come from somewhere. It has to be metabolized and turned into that. And when you see werewolves and anything else, just all of a sudden, boom, you just gain 300 pounds worth of mass here. Where did that come from? How did that work? And I've always been kind of scientific and stuff like that. So I was like, I can't just do because magic. That never worked. And I kept taking that further and further extreme, where it's like, well, there's all this stuff on. And I was like, I've already set the precedent. I have to have a base. I have to give it my everything. And so I just kept everything else. It all started with that. I'm going to do the werewolf story, but it has to make sense.
Hey, you're kind of breaking up a little bit.
Nothing's changed.
I was just,
Shoot, I was thinking it was me.
No, you kind of broke up a little bit there, Josh.
Where did you lose me?
No, I heard for the most part, but if you want to just backtrack a little bit.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I was always the kid that asked why for everything. So
Okay.
when I'm telling a story and somebody asks why, then I want to be able to give them the reason. And whenever I watch a werewolf movie or something and they turn and pack on an additional 300 pounds worth of mass with no explanation for where it comes from at all, it just drives me crazy. Just to nowhere.
Continuity.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Which really, the way you did it
Now,
helps so much. You did a great job in that.
And so it's something, and I knew it would be funny too, because
Yeah.
if you have to pack on mass and you're not growing any, it has to go somewhere. So I just thought of like these two just hyperinflated people like waddling down the street, and I was like, oh yeah, absolutely.
all right. So now, the one that had me perplexed a little bit when you start listening to it. How did you come up with the worst hotel?
I was just talking about this on the Discord, maybe last night. It came from two different dreams that I had, and one of them was a recurring dream, and the other one was this really vivid nightmare I had when I was like deathly ill. And the nightmare was like literally, it sounds like the worst hotel. I was trapped in this place with hallways that just don't end, and these weird creatures everywhere, all over the place. And I finally found the lobby. And when I finally found the lobby, there were these giant bugs scuttling everywhere. There was a guy with a flamethrower in one corner. There was a guy bashing him with a hammer in the other corner. And I'm just trying to huddle in this corner and figure out what the hell's going on. And that was that part of the dream. Was like, holy crap, that was wild. But then I had another one that I kept having several times in a row about this, like these ruins, these ancient stone ruins, where you could only find by accident. But when you got there, there would always be somebody else from another part of the world. And no matter what language they spoke, you could always understand what they were saying. And every time it was a different person. And I just kind of put those two ideas together. And like, well, what if this place with the halls has these properties of these old ruins that you find by accident? And just kind of played with it in my head over and over again. And just, how things progress as you could kind of keep on piling on new ideas. And kind of like I wanted this thing where you have these different explanations for how you get all these weird creatures. Like I said, I'm very sciencey minded, very biologically inclined. So I was like, once you understand things like evolution and phylogeny and monophyly and stuff like that, you start going, well, how do you get these things that just don't show up anywhere in fossil records or in DNA patterns or anything like that? I was like, well, they have to be coming from somewhere. Something has to be happening. And so I was like, well, there you go. There's your function of this hotel. There are these different versions of reality where these things evolve differently and under different circumstances, but close enough to where they're compatible with different atmospheres and things like that. And just over time, that kind of congealed, and then that's how that eventually solidified, was as the Worst Hotel.
Now, one of the most intriguing parts about the Worst Hotel is the library.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the whole interaction between Travis and, what I'm going to ruin for some people, Hook's brother, right? That's Hook's brother. What I want to ask, why is Hook's brother so like lurking down there, but I don't want to ruin the story for anybody. So can I just tell you how I came about listening to the entire your entire Worstverse? So I did listen to Cerber, right? And then I had saw Nature had posted a video called Dirty Work Inc. And I'm like, all right, I'll give it a listen. So I started listening to it and I'm like, wow, this is really good. I'm like, damn, this is really good. So I started listening to all the parts. And then I'm like, I'm trying to put together I'm trying to put together like who Louis approached in the beginning of his story. And then I'm like, there's so much stuff I'm missing. So I started like deep diving. I'm like, there has to be more to this. And then I'm like, oh, there's a lot of this story to this. And I've been deep diving into it ever since. Like I would just want to say the amount of effort and just thoughtfulness you've put into the story over, say, the last, like you said, the last 5.5 years, man. I unbelievable. I just want to say that again. It's unbelievable. And I'm telling you guys need to go start the Worstverse from the beginning of the story to update it. Now, some of the character play that you did, right? We'll start with if it's the last thing I do. What made you change? Why? What? I know you went. It was the Peter Pan Hook story, but how did you come about making it your own variation on that? Because that story right there is very, very. It brings the listener in, brings the reader in.
Yeah. What I like to tell people that whenever they ask, like, casually, is I didn't change much. Like when you read the original story, or when you especially like my inspiration was always like the original, like, 1950s Disney Peter Pan, because once you really watch it, and like it was mentioned like in Jose's Day Off, and we're watching that movie, is if you really pay attention, like really watch the detail, Hook's not the bad guy, Pan is. But the movie literally starts with him kidnapping children. Like, Full stop. The movie begins with him committing a felony and kidnapping children and taking them away from their family. And then forcing other kids that he's taken away to presumably fight pirates. And then throughout the rest of that movie, if you notice, Hook never actually actively tries to hurt anybody other than Pan. The only reason Tiger Lily almost drowned was because Pan had distracted him to where he couldn't get to her anymore. And when he does the bomb thing, he waits until all of the other Lost Boys are out of the den, out of the hideout, before he does the whole bomb thing. So the only person that he ever tries to hurt is Peter Pan. And there's other theories that people go into that like Hook's crew is like the boys that he's managed to save from Peter Pan over the course of time. And it always stuck with me. I was like, ever since I was little, I was like, there's something really wrong with it, because even the first depiction of Peter Pan in that movie, he has that black bandit strip over his eye to kind of make him look villainous. So you go through and learn, like, even throughout the course of the story, Pan takes all of his money and hides it from him. He chops off his hand and feeds it to a crocodile as a joke for shits and giggles. That boy is a monster throughout that whole thing. So I always wanted to like, well, let's do this and then do this big reveal at the end, to where people are kind of like going, this story seems familiar, but I can't place it. Something's not right here. And then we get to the end with those last lines, and that's taken directly out of that original Disney movie. That line, if it's the last thing I do, is when Peter Pan is tormenting Hook so bad that he starts to cry. He says, "I'll get you for this, Pan, if it's the last thing I do." Like, that's literally taken directly out of that, where he's just tormenting this man until he cries for fun and having a blast with it. So that kind of like set that up, is I didn't change much. I just consider it telling the story leading up to that part and then afterwards.
Okay. Well, yeah. Um, the the coins. Now, how I haven't watched Peter Pan in so long. Were the coins in the movie? Were did you take that from the movie?
No,
Or
that's actually that's historical. That's something that sailors used to do for real. They would keep uh, Spanish dollars, an 8 real piece. That's why it's called a piece of 8, just because it's a piece worth 8 real, 8 Spanish denominations. So they would keep it because it was such a strong currency that most ports in the world would accept Spanish currency. So they would keep one of those in case they got stranded or something happened. They needed medical bills or funeral expenses at the time. So they would all keep at least a piece of 8 on them most times. So that's just something that they would have had on them at the time.
Now, Pan ends up being the big bad at the end of, I'd say, the first series, right? The subtle touch of the Lost Boys being a paramilitary force army, that I thought that was such a great twist on that the invasion of Dracula's house, um, and the fact that how did you come to the idea of having Hook, Dracula, and Jekyll hang out together?
Really, that's just I'd say that's me playing in my sandbox more than anything, because uh, those are characters I've always been really fond of, like my whole life. Like if I move out of the way, that book right there, that's a copy of Dracula that's over 100 years old. Um, so these are like really important characters to me, and I wanted to like do something with them. And it's also, I tell people I write more to challenge myself than anything, to have fun. So you tell people at face value, there's this story where Captain Hook, Dracula, and Dr. Jekyll are hanging out in a mansion together. Be like, well, that sounds kind of fucking stupid. Yeah, and that's why I went with it. Is because I wanted to make that a decent story. I wanted to make that something fun and believable and readable that people would actually like to listen to, and more importantly, that I would like to listen to, because that's you should always be your biggest critic. Um, so I want to see what I can do with anything. Like I said, like right now, one of the most popular stories I've got on YouTube is called "I Banged a Werewolf." Like that's part of why I do that. It's like I want to give this the dumbest title absolutely possible, the dumbest title, the dumbest premise, and then make a decent story out of it. So like I had somebody get up my ass about a Dracula in the basement. To this day, I still think that was the most fun I ever had writing a story. But they're like, it's not a Dracula, it's just Dracula. So you can tell that they never made it like 30 seconds into the actual story, because that's like the first point that they address. Like,
And
there you
speaking of Dracula in the basement, that was a pretty funny damn story. I love that one. The interaction between
Yeah.
Moses, yeah, I love that one. And what is there going to be any more, say, parts to Dracula, or is just it's those two parts?
you're gonna see more of Amanda than anyone else
Okay.
because she's the paranormal one. But that storyline does progress. Like I have this whole thing that I've been trying to get done for I don't know how long, but it's called Life, Death in the Library, where it's her going through this adventure in the library, um, and then she becomes a recurring character in the newer series. She's like a secondary character, but you see more of her, and you see more of other characters that have been established, like Alex. He shows back up in there, and you kind of see that story progress. Uh, and then you kind of build on those things, those little groundworks that have been laid kind of earlier on. Uh, that's what I
Okay.
tend to like to do, is set things up with a like keystone story and then build off of that.
Yeah. We got a question from uh, Tantalo. Speaking of Pan, I've been curious for a while. So in the Worstverse, what does Neverland Corp even do?
Think of it like DuPont or any massive corporation that you would have to ask the same question in real life. What do they even do?
Yeah,
Everything.
with food and everything.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the whole
Yeah.
point. When you're around that long, you can diversify very effectively. Like I said,
Yep.
like most companies like that will have some kind of paramilitary force working for them. If it's not
Mhm.
their own, they'll hire private military contractors. But they're essentially, once you get to a certain point with corporations like that, they become a government unto themselves. Like it's obscene. It's like what they're actually capable of when you reach a certain size and are able to throw that kind of money around.
All right, 1.1. I don't think there was another one. Check. Aaron Paul has said Milo needs to be supervised by two adults at all times. Milo is one of the characters from from Werewolves Are Assholes. Uh, I agree. So
Yeah, you don't know if he's smart or stupid.
now the the oh, I'm gonna kill this the way it's pronounced. Orichalcum.
Orichalcum.
Orichalcum. I'm a layman. How did you come up with that?
I didn't. That's also a historical metal, like that came about around Greece. It's not a metal of itself. The real orichalcum is an alloy of specific metals. Mostly it's copper based, like bronze or brass, things like that. Just with other certain traces like iron and nickel, things like that. But yeah, orichalcum itself is a real metal. Like if you've ever seen the actual real sword from Cursed Object, and like I find out later it has orichalcum in it, is I made
Where's my
actual
pen?
mod.
That's the one. That's the one I wanted to talk about because I was deep diving on your Twitter page, and you actually made that blade, and I saw the comment that said you have friends that won't even won't touch it.
Oh yeah, like the ones who've actually read that story, they won't go around it. It freaked them out. Where's oh yeah, I actually have it. Yeah, so you can actually kind of see that
Here, I'll put you up on
alloy or
put you
calcium.
up on the main screen. So
Ooh. Hey, I like that.
now
So
this
actually,
this is this is the this is the blade based out of the most cursed object. That's a hell of a design.
Hey, I could use that next time I go in the woods.
That is
so yeah, that's everything that you hear in the story. That's how that was made. I made it before I read the story just to see if I could do something that would come out the way I was seeing it in my head.
see.
So yeah, everything that's in the story is there, material wise.
I'm noticing that, and what's making me appreciate your creation even more is that even in this few minutes I've been asking you questions about it, I can tell you have done your research on the stuff you're putting on this story, and that's that's making it so much. That makes it so much more believable because you actually built the blade before you decided to write the story to see if it was actually doable. Um, not for nothing, I probably wouldn't touch that thing either after listening to that story. That was a crazy story. So, are we now the most cursed object? That I understand that story was to introduce Hook's brother,
Mhm.
right? Now, are we? Is Hook's brother going to play a further part in the rest of the story?
What I like to tell people is he's been playing a huge part of the entire story. If you really focus in, um, most of the events that have led up to this point have been some effect of his at some certain point. Uh, so, where did Lita get the knife that she used
She
to
got
hunt
it.
him?
She got it
From
from
him.
Hook's brother. Yep.
So, if she hadn't had that, you wouldn't have had these vampires move their operation way out into the woods. If they weren't way out in the woods, who would have not ran into them? And then who would have not doubled back to get more of these weapons from him where he dropped that flash drive? But then simultaneously, you have the events at Worst Hotel with Travis, which caused the bug outbreak, which ran
His brother
them off
off.
to California. So then you also have the event where he in Dirty Work Inc., where you end up with them finding the book and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
he's been there the whole time. He's never not been an important part of the story.
I'm thinking about it now. He has been pretty much mentioned in almost every story, I think, except a Dracula in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, thinking about it now, that's like the only one he hasn't been mentioned in.
Well, the one-offs he tends to not be in, like We Raided the Wrong Tomb, Jack in the Basement. Um, so and some of the other ones that I make people discover or link to that for themselves. But yeah, he tends to, if it's a core part, if it's one of the series, you'll see him in there eventually.
So, and we rated the wrong tomb. That gives an explanation of how that gold liquid works, operates in the vampire system.
Yeah, you get a better explanation later on. That story is there to set up Magenta Valley, that book I've been working on for God knows how long.
Okay, I knew there was going to be another one where that tied into something else.
Well, yeah, those characters, you're not going to see those characters, but those events specifically, there's one very important event in that story that sets up all of Magenta Valley. Everything else, it has no relation to any of the characters you know so far. It has no relation to any of those events. It's its own thing. It's its own isolated thing. But it sets that up. It's the trigger for the rest of that story.
Okay, is there going to be any more coming from we hit the wrong ruins uh, when it comes to that globe that was found at the entrance once they blasted that door open?
That's more of like a tongue-in-cheek reference to what's going on.
Okay,
So yeah, those are just like little hints there for you to look at. So you understand that there is a certain network in place of something, and then it's kind of up to you to dig through and figure that out. Um, that's a habit of mine. Like I tell people before I started doing the series, I wrote mystery stuff, like detective stuff, mystery stuff, things like that. A bunch of them that'll never see the light of day, but that's what had my interest prior to that. So I still keep those elements where I let the audience discover and connect stuff. Like I told people, you could have found out the thing behind Ash being Hook's brother way early on. First, you could have confirmed it absolutely the first season of I Ride for Cerber. When he hands Jose that knife, it literally has his name on the knife. So, it has Ash Kravinock, and you have Hook's name, James Kravinock, right there. So you have that connection solidified. So if you catch it, you can figure things out a long time in advance.
okay.
We got a
Now, like
question.
in
Go ahead.
Werewolves Are Assholes, like all the extra characters you have in there, where did you get the idea for those other characters? Is it from friends you have or people you know?
Some of them are like an amalgamation of people. Like there's a handful that I just tell people straight out, like these are people that I know in real life, that exist in real life. And in that group specifically, the main character, the protagonist, is inspired by somebody I know who went through something very similar to what that character went through. So that's not the actual person, but that's based off of a real person. But Gay Jake, he exists 100%, as depicted. So Gay Jake
Okay,
exists.
because that was the one character we was wondering because it reminds me of one actor, Leslie Jordan,
Oh yeah, I
the
know
gay guy
Leslie.
from Tennessee.
Yep.
When he spoke, I was like, that's got to be him. You had to pick him to
No,
play
I
Gay
mean
Jake.
really, there is a person I know named who goes by Gay Jake. That's him. I didn't change anything. I've known him for I don't know how many
Yes.
years. But that Gay Jake is a real person. Tony's a real person. Han Lao's a real person. Harley's a real person. So I mean, there's a lot of different people here who actually exist who are not really fictionalized that much at all.
Okay.
All right. So I want to. We're gonna dive into Dirty Working because that's by far my favorite story of Worstverse, and
Okay.
I'm gonna bring up an image real quick. And a lot, and when I saw this image on Reddit, I was like, "This makes sense now." You'll know what I'm talking about. It makes. I was like, "This makes so much sense now."
You know why you love it so much? It
This,
seems like everybody. You know why? You know why you love it so much? Because it seems like it takes place in New York. That's why.
that so was this really the inspiration? Was this the cartoon, the Tom and Jerry episode, really the inspiration for the characters of Worstverse?
Well, it
Part
was
of
the
partial
inspiration.
part of it.
It was the inspiration for the theme of it. Because I knew there had to be some shady organization that was doing, this unscrupulous work that nobody wanted to do. and it was bugging me. I'm like, I was bouncing between whether I wanted to reference something or I wanted to come up with something completely original. And I just, when I'm like that, I'll just go through and watch random stuff. And I was going through, and nothing was clicking. And then I saw a random meme uh, of Jerry's cousin, which is the only actual, or you get Muscles, but his actual name you never get. But they call him either Jerry's cousin or cousin Muscles, Muscle Mouth. Um, so it started clicking. I was like, oh, holy shit! And then I was like, that's it. And so I was like, that's it. That started to build the story because I was like, so we've got three guys, and for some reason that nobody can really pin down, they all wear certain sweaters and these old timey stupid bowler hats. So you got this air of mystique to them. Why do they do that? Who can figure that out? You've got the new guy, which would be Louis in this case, who takes the role of Jerry, or Tom, who takes the role of Tom, and then you have this overpowered nightmare, Han Lao, who takes the role of Jerry's cousin. And so the name sold itself, Dirty Work Inc. There you go. So I was just like, that's it. That'll do it. And it makes a great reference for anybody who can actually figure it out. So it's always like, just that extra layer of something to dig around and find. But as a lifelong Tom and Jerry fan, I was like, oh, there's no way I'm not doing this. It had to be done. But also simultaneously, when I looked at it, it fits so well. Is because I go to conventions, and when I go to conventions, I've got one coming up in like a week or two. I do a Umbrella Corporation themed cosplay group, so we dress up like Umbrella Corporation soldiers. And the people I go with are John, Chris, and Nick. So there's four of us usually. So Nick took the place of Tom, or he became, Louis. So then you have Johnny, who was John, and then you have Chris in the blue, and then I just threw in Mark to kind of occupy my space. So I just needed somebody, there to occupy that space and kind of reference that group. So that's why I gave him the red sweater to kind of like, reference my red hair or whatever. But like I said, I wanted somebody to occupy that space because my one rule is I don't write myself into stories. So I just wanted somebody to occupy that space, and that was Mark. So that's what he ended up.
So in there's a section in Dirty Work Inc. where Mark is pretty much working a hunter over.
Mm-hmm.
Now I read why you won't write like a hunter story. Could you explain it to say the people that are have listened to this, listen to the Worstverse, and what would like to know why you say you wouldn't write a hunter story?
Yeah, it's not any one reason. There's a bunch of reasons. One of them is just that is the go-to for the overpowered self-insert of Reddit stories and things like that. Is I'm going to put myself in this story and hunt monsters. Like when people come and say, "Hey, I'm writing a thing," 99% of the time it's going to be Monster Hunter story. 99% of the time. So everybody's doing it. I've seen it. I'm over it. And then the other one is because there's this there's this fantasy to it of, hey, there's these things that aren't human, so I can kill them however I want because they're not human. Who cares? Kind of like trophy hunting, which I also have a huge problem with. Like if you're hunting for food, more power to you. Kill it, eat it, use it all. But if you're just going out to kill something, now we got a problem. So I don't really like that mindset. I think that's the same mindset that gets people into the Monster Hunter genre is, hey, I want to go and kill these things. And they're not human, so who cares? And I don't subscribe to that philosophy. I think that making human a baseline to consider something as a sentient being and treat it with kindness is kind of a low bar. So I built that character around this thing where he has this huge chip on his shoulder because he lost somebody very, very important to him, to this kind of ideology and thought process. So he hates them with this burning passion. And at the same time, the last reason is because these hunter stories are largely, like I said, these self-inserts for people who have never even thrown a punch in anger. The whole point of Dirty Work Inc. is, like I said, people like it, but it's the story is essentially to go, you don't want this to be real. You don't. Because people are like, oh, well, you know, if it was real, I would be in Dirty Work Inc. And I'm like, or you could be in one of those houses. That's how that turns out. You're equally likely, or you could just never know it exists at all. It could be real. It could be an idea.
You can end up in that barn. You can end up in that barn like they found in Dirty Work Inc.
Yeah, there's all kinds. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with that whole series. But specifically, like those things with the hunters, is I wanted to show people who have this kind of thought process. This is where you actually end up. Like I said, the people who've never shot a gun, never thrown a punch in anger, no training of any kind, no tactical sensibilities. That's what happens to you. Oh, monsters are real. We're going to go kill some monsters. And now you're in Mark's chair. That's the logical conclusion to that.
So, okay. So now the Louis and Abigail.
Yes.
I saw. Then weren't you getting shit about the Abigail thing?
Oh, shit, nothing. I've got death threats about that. Her, Abigail, Gay Jake, and the protagonist from Werewolves Are Assholes. I've had death threats on all 3 separate occasions from just that. Yeah.
Just, it's only a story, people. Like, don't get
Exactly.
It's only a story. Just if you don't want
It looks off, if you're thinking about it, yeah, it looks off, but she's older than him.
Well, okay, so the thing, like I always tell people when it comes to characters, Abigail is one of my favorites because she is older than the Worstverse. By which I mean I came up with her as a character long before I came up with the idea for the Worstverse, and the seeds of it, what inspired her as a character. Most people they don't really believe me at first, and I have to explain it to them. Robin Williams inspired that character. Because when I was young, he did a movie called Jack, and it's one that flew under a lot of people's radar. But the premise of this story is Robin Williams. For anybody who doesn't know, who's watching, I have to remember there's more people than just you watching. But for anybody who doesn't know or who's too young to remember it, the premise of the story, the plot of the story is Robin Williams plays this child who's born with this disease that makes him age 10 times faster than normal. So by the age of, or like 4 times faster, yeah, whatever. But by the age of like 10, he looks 40 years old. So he looks like a full-grown man, but inside of it, you have this mind of a child. So he's going through all of these things that a child would go through, but he also looks like a 40-year-old man. So he eventually talks his parents into letting him go to a regular school with regular kids. And his teacher, who I think it was Jennifer Lopez, who played his teacher, and they're having this school dance, like this little school, like, you know, nothing too serious, not like a prom or anything, but they're having a school dance. So he comes to this conclusion in his own mind. He's like, I want to go to this dance. He says, but even him in his 10-year-old mind knows I cannot ask one of these girls in my grade to go with me because I look like I'm 40 years old. So he asks his teacher, and she shuts him down because she's like, oh, well, no, I can't. So then you have this quandary. Well, what's the right thing to do for this person? Like, how do you treat this very rare example of something? Like, should she have? Shouldn't she have? And how do we deal with that? So I was like, I just wanted to do a much more contentious version of that. Like, not do the stereotypical, like, lolly vampire character. Like, I mean, really make them real and, like, see how unpleasant of a situation she's found herself in. And her whole backstory is, again, like I said, the reason I introduced her in Worst Hotel, or not Worst Hotel, but Dirty Work Inc., is to show you don't want this world to exist as much as you might think. Because if you have something like a contagious element of the paranormal, like vampirism, there's your driving force for most people getting turned. is specifically the thing that happened to Abigail. It's not just going to be make new vampires. It's going to be that. That's where you're going to get most of your new vampires. So we're really staring this thing down. That's what you get with the paranormal. We want paranormal to be real. This is the baggage that comes with it. So then now we have to look at, now look at Louis's position. What's he supposed to, like, how is he supposed to treat Abigail? How are we all supposed to treat Abigail? Even more so, how are we supposed to treat Louis if he decides to get with Abigail?
Yeah.
Like, knowing all this stuff. So it's meant to really make us stop and think and consider these things rather than have a knee-jerk reaction, go, oh, I don't like. Because a lot of time when I see that stuff, it just makes me think they're telling on themselves. Like when you watch the news, the people who are always like harping on something, you end up like, oh, the anti-gay people, and then you find out they're at a gay brothel, 3 times a week or something. So whenever I see that, I'm always like, I feel like, this is very accusation to the mission. So it makes me kind of like weary of people who are like very like
But Callie, you can find the Worstverse on Reddit, or I'll add the link to I'll add the link to Josh's channel, and he has the playlist. He actually has 2 playlists on there for the Worstverse. The one in listen order, and the one in chronological order, where it's the order of events. And
so there's another one too. There's the other stories, and I don't tell people what's in there that's connected to the wars. Some of them aren't, some of them are, and you have to figure that out for yourself.
Oh man,
that's even better.
Going down more of the rabbit hole, man. Come on.
Oh, if you haven't been in other playlists, then yeah, you've got some shit.
Oh, why did you just tell them that?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm on my second time listening to the Worstverse, because you know how sometimes you'll listen to something, or you'll be watching something and you'll get distracted and you'll miss parts. That's why I'm re-listening to it, because there's certain. I've been listening I listen to it at work, and then I'll get distracted, like I have to go do something, and I'll come back, I'll miss like 2-3 minutes of it, and I'm like, oh, what the hell? So now I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna start it from the beginning, and I'm got everything like that. And
I'm on my 3rd.
Will, dude, I'm telling you, Will. I told Wilcott about it, and Wilcott was like, okay, I'm gonna look it up. And he's like, yo, dang, that is a really good story. And I like you're right about the hunter stories, because it seems like every story that's coming out, say being narrated or being wrote on Reddit, is we're monster hunters and everything like that. And it's actually refreshing to read and listen to something that's like, no, you don't want this shit to be real. Like, breaking news, Josh is adding an extra chapter to the end of the road. All right, so now Dirty Work Inc. again. Can I just say, man?
All right, now I got a question.
Go ahead.
Where does Dirty Work Inc. take place? Is it like New York City, Chicago, or
LA? Specifically,
the way I'm listening to it, I'm pretty sure this is like
no, it's a bunch of guys from the East Coast that are out in LA, and they're doing it. You gotta excuse him. He's only recently.
He's a little behind on it.
Yeah, I have a map where I like that I looked over. Like I know Lincoln Heights at this point about as well as I do my own town, because I spent so much time getting familiar with it, where I can tell you exactly where the Dirty Work Inc. building is, what's around it, how to get the fastest route from Dirty Work Inc., where Jose lives, or where Jose lives to the Worst Hotel, and different things like that. So yeah, it all takes place mostly in Lincoln Heights, Los Angeles.
All right, so I got to bring this up, and I know it was a driving point in the story, Mark's death.
Mhm.
Because Mark, I honestly say in Dirty Work Inc., Mark was by far like my favorite character,
Mhm.
and just uh, why the what's the reason behind Holly taking him out?
Okay, so I would like. I've heard that question a couple times. So I would say, why would anybody murder anybody for anyone? Like, if you follow along a rational train of thought and get to don't murder this person, right? Like anybody with their full faculties about them, who consider
Oh,
all the
Holly is
consequences and all these things that could happen, will ultimately come to don't murder. Like for a suite of reasons, we usually end up at don't murder. So usually, like I said, when you have somebody who is prone to impulses, like I said, she's one of the real characters. So just about everything that Harley does in that story, there's some kind of real life. Why the hell would you do that parallel to it? So I said, when you have somebody like that who's prone to knee jerk decisions and committing to things without a lot of thought, there you go. Is just an emotional train of thought rather than if I'm being logical, if I'm being rational, don't do this thing. So that tends to be the thought process of like, we rarely do things that we regret when we're thinking completely rationally and we make the right decision.
yeah, okay. I got you. A question. I got a question about it. It comes back to the pan. It comes back to the Peter Pan hook story. The croc.
Mhm.
How I it's revealed in the story that they're a creation of Poseidon,
Mhm.
and the last upload that Nature did with Poseidon, I could have swore I was listening to the dude, man. But but how what made you go what made you go that direction with the croc from the story?
Well, it's kind of going back to the original, like Peter Pan, that like influenced me from my childhood, like watching that movie over and over.
Mhm.
Nobody's fighting the crocodile. Nobody's like throwing hands with it. They're get away from the crocodile. You don't fight the crocodile. You don't beat the crocodile. You hear the ticking, and then all of a sudden, shit stops. It's time to leave. So
Mhm.
I wanted to do a scary version of that. Like let's make that actually scary. Let's make a monster out of it. Um,
Oh, you did a damn good version of it.
I wanted to do that. Like I said, I wanted to take that. Like I said, take a stupid premise and make something fun and decent out of it. Like that tends to be a lot of my driving force behind writing is let's take something that sounds stupid on its surface and then do something really cool with it.
So why'd you make why'd why'd you make Poseidon their creator? That
Okay, so
that's what I was like that was a really interesting thing. I'm like that's pretty cool.
so we loop back to like one of the very first questions is I'm very science minded, very interested in things like biology. Like one of the I did a video for Scott's other channel, basically Nature, about abiogenesis, so how we get from you know non-life to life in very old world conditions, uh, and that generally starts in water. Like that, you need water to facilitate that. Like life originates from water. There's one thing we know for sure: water is essential to life. Like we need it. We come from it. So Poseidon's the god of the ocean. So it would make sense for him to be, like I said, we have Athena, who's the god of war, goddess of war. We have Hephaestus, who is, the god of machination, steel and iron and invention industry. Then we have Poseidon, who's that other factor is things like organic chemistry, molecular chemistry, biology, things like that that would be that other factor there. So instead of just being about the ocean itself, just water, make it more about what the ocean produces, which is organisms, life, creatures, and ultimately us. So I think that was kind of something that I really wanted to do, is how to tie that all back. But also it explains, like I said, making his character the way he was is, like I said, like sound like, the just blitzed out of his mind surfer dude. Well, now we have explanations for all the ridiculous crap in there, minotaurs and goblins and stuff that makes no sense in an evolutionary train of thought. It's just like, you can just see him kind of like sitting there going, ha, it'd be really cool. A bull, but like upright, like a guy. Yeah, let's make that happen. And now you have minotaurs. So
I got you. Yeah. Okay. Damn, man, this is such. This is so well thought out. I was. Damn.
Okay.
Guys,
Bama asked something earlier on Destiny's second boyfriend. Is there going to be any more revealed about who he really was?
kind of, not a whole lot. Let me see. You'll get it tied back around, but that's going to be later on.
Okay.
Because like I said, once the current series that we're doing are over, that doesn't mean those characters disappear. I think we're it's these are kind of like these are a mess too, like how they're posted, like the other ones were. Is the timeline isn't this thing happens and this thing happens and this thing happens. You have to kind of suss out the timeline. Like Tales of Haley Handiwork is going to be over a long period of time, from like 2004 up to like current time. But the other two are going to be essentially current time. So you're going to see a very very different versions of characters that you're familiar with, like Jose. You're going to see a veteran Jose who's been in the paranormal world for years at a time, and you're going to find, and it'll make more sense why you're going to see such a different Jose, like as this last season progresses. But you're going to see him. Destiny, Abigail's going to be back. Paige is going to be a bigger part, and that's more out of necessity. Paige is because Scott can't do Sobek's voice, and editing my voice in there is a big hassle for him. So it keeps me from having to Paige speaking on behalf of Sobek keeps me from having to constantly do Sobek's voice, and then him having to break his routine and edit it. So that's why Paige is going to be in there a lot. But you're going to have these characters showing back up. The established characters, Amanda's going to be in there a lot. Alex is going to be so you're going to get to see them again, but like different versions of them who have been in the world for an extended period of time.
Damn, I just had a question too, and I was gonna say, if there's going to be more of this person, blink twice. What the hell? I just lost my train of thought. Like, there's gonna be more of this person. Just blink twice for me, and I'll know. I'll backtrack on that one though. Next time when it comes back to me, I'm gonna write it down. All right. So now the Tegan's the whole revelation that Athena is Tegan's mom. Tegan's mom is the maid's sister.
Yes.
And Tegan's mom is 5,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
What? And then get this, folks. Dr. Jekyll's daughter's half werewolf. That was crazy to me when I worked my way through the story and I found that one out. I'm like, holy what? Like, that was one of the things I had missed hold on. Is Enos and Travel? Okay. Aaron asks, is Ina and Travis going to get together?
That's what I'm saying. You have to actually wait and see. That's one of the things I don't spoil is like.
Yeah, we ain't gonna give them spoilers.
you're intentionally left to figure that out as the story progresses. But
Is there,
like the whole thing with like you were talking about, like with Tegan's mom and Athena and the maid and all that stuff. Like I gave people hints. Like I give people hints in stupid ways. Like when I've been doing the whole keychain thing. So I was like, well, what characters to go with? So I specifically went with Athena, Mika, the maid, and Tegan. And so there you go. So and other little things is like Athena on her dress has two rubies, and then if you look at like Mika's costume, her whole thing she wears is she wears a red bandana and then the red sash, so red and red. So you get these little tiny hints from time to
I
time
think
that
I
kind
have.
of like steers you towards a direction. But the whole thing, like I said, there's some kind of method to the madness there, is because when you first see Abigail, she appraises like ancient paranormal items and stuff like that. She knows just these really obscure things about the paranormal world and paranormal history and ancient languages that nobody knows anymore. How? Like nobody throughout the court like asked, how does she know this? There you go. Like she was raised by somebody who's 5,000 years old. Like she got that info. Like you had a hint of it in I Banged a Werewolf, where Mika has this random book full of these different paranormal creatures and things like that she just handed away. So you get those little things like that that uh, kind of steer you towards those directions. Like, how would Abigail know all this stuff? Well, it's just because Mika knows all this stuff, and Mika raised Abigail. Like she was there for it. Like she saw a lot of it happen.
All right, so on screen right here, I have the. I'm gonna bring it. I'm gonna make it the. Make it full. Here's the renderings of Athena, Tegan's mom, the maid, and Nika. Is that what? I'm sorry. Well,
Yeah, Mika.
so
It means little in Romanian.
So on top in the top white, in the top corner in the white, that's Athena.
Mm-hmm.
It's Tegan's mom, Nika, in the blue here with the red. Bottom left, bottom corner there is the maid, which the maid, everybody, is Athena and Dracula's daughter, which was a hell of a revelation, a hell of a thing to come about. Um, and this right here on the bottom corner is Tegan, who is Dr. Jekyll's daughter. Like,
I kind of figured that was Dracula's daughter anyway, because she matched her sister so much. Well, her half sister
uh,
so much with the gaming and everything else.
And
She
oh my God, I gave so many hints leading up to it. So
just
many.
more
People figure it out. Like,
evil.
yeah. One of my favorites is just in the end animation that I did for every part. Is you have that swinging light bulb where it swings and it's Athena, and then as it swings behind, it turns to Dracula, and it keeps swinging, and then it fades out, and the maid is behind him. I just, little things like that I kept up and doing for like the past year or two.
that's a good question. Azrath asked, does the Hellverse book mojo help Yahweh retain his memory throughout the centuries?
Kind of, yes. A lot of it is just he's a very focused person. He knows what he's about and like he's set out to do. So it was like they were saying, is if it's a very important memory that you're always thinking about, you're more prone to remember it versus like what you ate December 2nd, 1902. Like it's the overarching information that they dwell on is what you're more likely to remember, but it would help him keep clarity of those memories. Um, so there is that factor. But and you also see more about it. Like I said, you'll figure out more about that book and what's going on with that as these stories draw to an end, because that's where they're all funneling towards anyways. So as you get closer to the end, you're going to get more information about all that and how that works later on.
Just checking to see if there was any more questions real here. Aaron Paul, I don't think anyone should be mad at you about Louis and Abigail. It's just it's just a story. Just
Yeah, that's why I tell you. It's like Twitter, where people can't really distinguish fiction from reality. That I tell you, that's what fiction. That's what, especially literature. That's what literature is best at. Is you can tackle these subjects. Like it would be really hard to do a story like Abigail's live action TV show or something. Because how you act that presents a whole problem all on its own. Because Abigail's not shy, she's not bashful, so you have that problem. You find an adult who looks extremely young, because there's no way you could get an actual child to play that role, not in a million years. But in literature, you can tackle all the hard stuff, and that's the thing. It's like people get so up in arms about Abigail, but they gloss over part 2 of the second season of Dirty Work Inc., which is without a doubt the most atrocious thing that you see throughout the course of that story. If you understand the full implication of those series of stories, and it's by far the most atrocious thing in that entire story.
so. Now in Cerber Feast, one of the things that was a nice little twist. Tom Cruise is Dr. Frankenstein.
Oh, I have all this. Yeah. That you want to talk about a feeling of relief when I finally got that payoff that I've been setting up for I don't know how long, because I've been giving hint after hint, little nudges here and there. So when that finally happened, finally gets revealed he's Victor Frankenstein, I was like, it's just such a feeling of relief, because that was the long game. That was one of the longest games I've played in all of these stories. But yeah, I got the original idea that came to me for that was actually from Christian Bale, of all people. And he like, there's an interview somewhere. I can't remember where the interview comes from. I really need to look it up. But he's talking about his inspiration for the character Patrick Bateman, how he handled it as a character, was Tom Cruise. He said that his smile just creeped him out. He said, like, he would smile and then there would be nothing behind his eyes. It just freaked him out. So he based the character Patrick Bateman, as he portrayed him, on Tom Cruise. And so I was like, well, there you go, right there. That's something, man. That's great. Patrick Bateman, the American Psycho, is based on Tom Cruise. So I was like, yeah, we can do something like that. Like, let's just we're in LA. Let's throw Tom Cruise in there. Like, he's one of the most famous people in the world. It's one of the funniest things I could think of to randomly show up. Because people are always like, well, why would it be Tom Cruise? Why would he be so intimidating and scary? And I just redirect them to that interview with Christian Bale talking about his inspiration for Patrick Bateman. And I'm like, there you go. There you have it right there.
And the touch about the Les Grossman movie.
Oh, we did it. We did it. It took me years. They're making a Les Grossman movie.
Oh, yeah?
They're finally doing it. I'm taking credit for it. I don't care if I had to do that. I'm taking credit for it, because nobody was talking about it until I started writing that stupid shit over and over again in that story. And then it popped up in my feed one day. They're making a Les Grossman movie. Like, we did it, people. We did it.
Tactical Web said, this is why Tom hasn't aged since the 80s. No, he has. He's aged like reverse dog years since the 80s. Like, that man barely has a wrinkle on him. Just like what's his name? Paul Rudd.
Oh my God, yeah, the reverse aging of Paul Rudd.
I'm gonna ask you. You gonna throw Paul Rudd in one of these stories?
I keep trying to think about a new celebrity to put in since we're still in LA in the new series. I'm always thinking, what's the funniest one? And I just there's no telling who it's going to end up being.
All right, I'll be on the lookout for that one.
Can, can we get Dan Aykroyd? What about Dan Aykroyd?
Oh my god,
Dan
yeah,
Aykroyd as Dan Aykroyd.
the yeah the Bill Murray that just makes me think of the Bill Murray cameo in Space Jam where he shows up and then Danny DeVito goes, I didn't know Dan Aykroyd was in this picture. It's Bill Murray.
uh, so, question, right? So, this is it's still Wilcut is the one that put me up on this. Now, I don't know how much people are paying attention to your writing, but there's a vampire movie coming out now called Abigail. Have you seen the trailer for this?
You have officially become like the 25th, 26th person to
Because
tell me about that.
I'm just saying, because I'm like, that's a little fishy, man. Come on now.
Oh yeah, it's I've gotten to the point where I'm like, if I had nothing to do with that, that would be more surprising. Because it's I've noticed that. Like I did a Dracula in the Basement, and then a while later, Vampires versus the Bronx came out, and then I did Complex, and then that horrible Adult Swim anime Housing Complex C with almost the exact same plot came out. And then I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw a trailer for Abigail, and I just thought, oh, like Killer Ballerina, like, you know, kind of like The Orphan, like something like that. It's like, surely it's not a vampire movie. So I start watching the trailer. I was like, there's no way this is a vampire movie. So then I watch even more, and then they do the snarl scene, like the hiss with the teeth. And I was like, you're shitting me. Like I had, like you can see the original where I talk about the inspiration for like the vampire fangs and stuff, and like exactly how they're supposed to look. And then when you see that in that trailer, they're virtually identical. I was like, and then you look at the plot where it's this little girl vampire interacting with this bunch of criminals. Like, yeah, that's it would
Somebody's been watching you.
much. It would surprise me very much if I had nothing to do with that movie. But at the same time, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah, it's just because Wilcup put me up on it. He's like, yo, did they steal this? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I watched the trailer and I'm like, no way. I was like, I think somebody's been paying attention to Reddit a little bit or something, watching YouTube a little bit.
That's the number one, like it's flattering, don't get me wrong, but the number one piece of feedback I always get is this should be a film, this should be a movie, this should be a series, and
Yes.
so I'm like it is, it's flattering, and I would love it. Oh my God, don't get me wrong, that'd make me the happiest, more happy than anything in the world. But I think a lot of, like I always tell people, I know way more about making movies than I do about writing, and so much about that industry is two things: who you know and where you are. That's it. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. Like I tell people, easy reference: look recent events like High Guardian Spice, Velma, oh my God, the Robin Hood series that they just released that rapper did. So it's more about who you know and where you are. Quality of the writing doesn't matter. I tell people, I said, we could grant that my writing is beyond exceptional. I'm not even saying it is, but I'm saying if we grant for the sake of argument, that means absolutely nothing when garbage writing can get produced because of who you are and where you are in the industry and things like that. Because like people are always saying, oh, Netflix should do it. They make anything. That's not how Netflix works. With things like that, you need an agent. Netflix does not talk to you. They talk to an agent. If you don't have an agent, you do not talk to Netflix. But Netflix only talks to certain agents that they already have a pre-existing relationship with. So those agents, knowing their demand and their worth, charge ungodly prices for their service. that you pay them whether you get optioned or not. So like you're I always one of the things I'm always saying is let's manage our expectations, guys. Like I want to do like a manga, like a graphic novel would be amazing for me. Like I've got one. It's not a Worstverse thing, but I've got one that I want to do, like a Kickstarter or something. Um, can't do it myself. I'm not that good of an artist. So there's going to be a lot of stuff to happen. But that's the kind of things like I'm aiming realistic. It would be great. It would be awesome if this gets, but that can't be me. That's the audience. Like by myself, I am nothing. Like the audience, they're the people who are going to share that around, talk with me. Uh, so like I am but a man, as they would say. But that's
So,
entirely.
Tactical Weeb said, "Am I the only one drunk at 11 p.m. going to the Abigail trailer to call them out for ripping off the worst verse?"
Oh, you tell them,
Do it.
Weed. There you go. That's good exposure, man. That's good exposure.
All right. So from Azarath, Fudo as a mythical presence is so under the radar in the Western world. What
I'd
made you
love to see a screenshot of that.
what made you such a big fan of him to make him the Billy badass in the story?
So, like you'll notice, like my favoritism of a character will kind of depend on where they rest in it. So he's right about that. So, Fudo in Buddhism, and prior to that in Hinduism, because prior to that he was worshiping Hinduism as Akala. So he's a transverse figure from old Hinduism into like especially like Japanese Zen Buddhism, and that's what he's called. I didn't make up those descriptors of him in Zen Buddhism. He's referred to as the immovable wisdom king or the destroyer of obstacles. He is in mythology Billy Badass. He's a serious figure. Like you see him depicted like with a sword called Kurikara, which in mythology literally cuts through ignorance. So there's these great things. Like I said, as somebody who's like a skeptic and like is science minded and appreciates knowledge and epistemology things like that, he stands out to me. Like that's what you should aspire to. Like if you're gonna pick a god and worship it, there you go. Like he's that's the one to aim for. Is one that promotes knowledge and wisdom and fortitude and all these things. That's the one. And his whole thing, you'll get more backstory on him too and why he's like that in the story. Like it's I don't just make him that way and go just make it so. There is a reason he is like that in the story that goes down a deeper rabbit hole that we get to later. But as far as my motivation behind it, yeah, that's it. He's like my favorite deity, really. That I really think is really cool and a really cool concept as far as theology goes. Is a deity who actually promotes like knowledge and wisdom over things like faith and things like that. So that was something that I always thought was really cool. That's why I made that type of
Are you planning on introducing any other deities or gods? Say maybe like a Zeus character or Hades or Apollo.
I want to do more obscure ones that people aren't familiar with because like Nehushtan wasn't actually a goddess in the traditional sense. She literally came from a serpent statue in the Bible. But I mean, like make a story out of that because Nehushtan kind of sounds feminine in and of itself. So like, let's see what we can do with that. But yeah, I don't want to do the stuff that people are already very familiar with, like Athena. I made her original name in the story Inanna, another real goddess of old Mesopotamia. So I want to kind of dig into. Like I said, a lot of people don't know that Ptolemy is a real deity in theology. So I kind of wanted to go through and start exploring things like that and like pick out all these like obscure deities that don't really get a lot of attention in like a lot of the more popular things. I mean, everybody does Zeus, but Nobody really focuses on Hephaestus, so that's why I wanted to focus on him and get that kind of interplay down instead of trying to focus on these ones that everybody's already done to death.
Fred Lau said Zeus is an asshole, but Hades is a pretty decent guy. So Luke Vet, yes, it is. Nature's Temper has narrated it already. It's on channel, but Will Cut just dropped the link to the playlist on Josh's channel. Everybody, go subscribe to Josh's channel. Right,
Yeah,
go
as
subscribe.
soon as they come out, they go into the playlist like immediately. I'm usually
Yeah.
that.
So as soon as they're released, they hit that playlist, and I'm going to let you know in the listen order playlist, 81 videos, ladies and gentlemen. He's been going
Yep.
at this for a long time.
Some are 30
it's a lot-
minutes, some are over an hour.
Yeah, and each one of them, it drags you in, especially the cliffhanger episodes. Like, now,
Oh God.
I like how you're taking what you're doing with Dracula. How he's a lot more. He's not. He did say he was Strigoi, but there's something. Apparently, there's something in that book that might give more information about why Dracula is the way he is.
Yeah, well, like I said, I tell people you have to. One of my things that I really like to focus on is the reliability of information within the story. Who you're getting it from, how they got that information, why they have it, what they're telling you. Are they withholding anything? It's the old unreliable narrator kind of thing. Like I said, there's one story in there in all these here, almost entirely a lie. The person telling you that story is lying to you throughout most of it. So in Dracula's case, now that we've got there, I don't have to tiptoe around this, is we know that Dracula has forgotten a lot about his past.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know what he was. He's looking through old texts and, books and stuff and trying to figure, and he goes, oh, well, this is the closest thing to what I'm seeing here. That must be it. So that's kind of the thing. Like even the vampires in there aren't the vampires in our traditional, so they don't just drink blood. Like they have, they have this whole system of things that they do that keeps from having a bunch of bloodless bodies just show up at random all over the world. So you have to cover your tracks there too. So there are things that are a little different. Werewolves have nothing to do with wolves. So you kind of have to tweak it if you want everything to be consistent and cohesive and work together. Especially when you're mixing mythologies, you can't just go, okay, well, the God of the Bible's real, and then go, well, okay, well, does that mean that the Bible account of how the world was created is real? Well, no. Well, why isn't it? Well, what's going on? Well, how do we have all these other gods? And you kind of get, we'll get to that later too, is why there are multiple gods. Like the idea that a god is like the creator being doesn't work in this context. So it's more of a title. So that's a descriptor that Dracula uses for himself. That's the closest thing he could find to what he was doing at the time. So he was just working out to the best of his current knowledge.
Now, in the Worstverse, who's older, Dracula or Athena?
Athena, by
far.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that whole quote from Blood Meridian is there for a reason. That she's been there pretty much longer than anybody else, with the exception of her siblings, like Poseidon and Hephaestus.
See, right here, one of my listeners, I heard Truth talking about the Worstverse on a past recent show. I'm flipping hooked. I told you. I am never going to
No
recommend
hooks in the Worstverse. You're not.
I'm never going to ever. I'm only going to recommend stuff that is completely awesome, guys. And I'm telling you,
It's like I tell people, if you like my stuff, like Murder Drones, are you guys familiar with that? Have you seen?
Mhm.
Okay, so the author of that, the guy who writes, his name's Liam Vickers, and I tell people, I say, like, he's not without his problems. He cannot finish things to save his life, but when he buckles down, he is probably one of the best horror authors of our generation. Um, I tell people, I say, if you want to find perfect horror stories stories that I would consider perfect horror stories, is Run Aground, Vampires in Romania, and the Mistrust Game, especially the Mistrust Game. Is that when he buckles down and writes, it's hard to top him. But he also has series, Design, which was a big influence when I started writing. When it got me into writing. He's bad about taking yellow halogen up and down. If it's up, then it's a really good one to listen to. But also, he has one that's finished from beginning to end, which is very rare for him, called Black Dogs. That is a really, if you like Worstverse stuff, go to Liam Vickers' channel. If it's still up, hopefully, um, and watch that because, like I said, it's Murder Drones is cool. It's got great animation and stuff, but the storytelling that Liam Vickers is capable of is purely exhibited on his old Scary Story Time with Liam channel. And some of the best horror stories you will ever read in your life are on that channel. He's a big inspiration to how I started writing horror and things like that.
I'm writing down that information right now. It's gonna be one of those channels I check out. Now, what? Nature's Temper, like that man, he brings your story to life, right? Like I think he's honestly one of the best narrators on YouTube. And
Part of
uh,
why I'm so attached to his channel, I don't really like calling him a narrator anymore because he's not narrating, he's acting. Like
yeah,
it's not the same thing anymore. It's
voice.
a different experience.
Yeah, he does
Uh,
a
um,
damn good job of it.
so
Astounding, extremely underrated.
now I'm not. No, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I am not throwing any shade on Doctor Creepin. I love Doctor Creepin also, but it's just has he just fallen behind on the stories? Just
Well,
and
there's two things. Is his He's so bad about his upload schedule that there were year-long gaps between anything Worstverse, and he's sitting there going, "Oh well, I'm gonna do it," and I wasn't even saying anything. I was just leaving him be, and he'll come back and be like, "Oh well, don't worry, I'm gonna." And I'm like, "Dude, whatever." Um, so there was that. But the reason I started on Dr. Creepin's channel is because when I started writing those at the time, he was the only narrator who had something like Dr. Creepin's Wall, where you could submit them directly to a narrator so that you would know that they would see them. And like I said, I love Dr. Creepin's narration, but he's one of those, the story has to fit him. He has a very distinct voice, and certain stories fit him better. And I'll go right out and say it every single time. Nature's Temper came nowhere near Dr. Creepin on the Cursed Object story because that was written specifically with Dr. Creepin's voice in mind and how he narrates. You can't top that. But the way the rest of the story is written is extremely dialogue heavy, closer to an audio drama than anything. Um, you benefit greatly. There's something added that's more than just a story when somebody like Scott, like Nature's Temper does, is because he adds that layer to it. It's no longer just a narration, it's a production. He's acting, he's creating something that's not just that story anymore. It's that video is something all on its own that I just wrote essentially the script for, and now he's completing the production of it with his narration, his voice acting.
I can't lie. I sit here. I'll be listening to like Dirty Work Inc. and I'll find myself trying to voice it like nature. It's pathetic. But Azrith has another question. Has this? I like how Mark was probably the only human who wasn't outright afraid of Han Lao. I wonder. I wonder what their brief relationship was. Now, did they have? Did in your developing of the story, did Han and Mark have a relationship besides Han bringing him the head of the croc?
Um, that's probably a strong word. That's one of those things. Like you ever had that one of those experiences where it's like, oh, is that your friend? And you go, more of an acquaintance. It is essentially that is less a relationship and more of an understanding. You have this chip on your shoulder about this part of the paranormal community. If you just run around hacking and slashing and causing all kinds of chaos, eventually something's going to show up that Han Lao can't do Han Lao stuff to. So, with Mark helping him navigate that, he gets to do whatever he's aiming to do without, bringing down the wrath of whatever might occur from that. So
Well,
there's an
there,
understanding and a respect there.
well, there was that interaction between Jose and Han Lao, where Han Lao tells him that he's working for Dirty Work Inc. because he's wearing the green derby and the tank top, and he just pretty much says they let me kill monsters.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that I think that's the only reason why he's even associating with Dirty Work Inc. is because he gets to kill. He gets after what happened to his sister. He gets a satisfaction from going out and killing these things,
Yeah.
but
And
only if they've stepped out of line. I'm guessing.
yeah, essentially, yes, it is to a certain degree, or to a degree that Dirty Working determines they have stepped out of line. I would say more than anything, uh, it is a better
All right.
description of that.
So, and if Dirty Work Inc. deems you stepped out of line, you like,
Yeah,
uh, all
All
right.
right. So,
part
truth.
of it
You've
is
been
weight in that community.
truth.
They say,
Listening to the story, you've been sending me photos of some of these characters. Listen to the story. I'm sorry. Listen to the story. You've been sending me like AI images of some of these characters who are in this story. Now, did you send me that one of Lao? Or was like the
Uh,
stocky dude,
yeah. Um.
stocky Asian dude?
Yeah. I don't know if you
If
came.
you can, like,
I don't know if you saw him in the Reddit group, but like I've been posting AI images of like the characters based on of what they look like, what look like in my head, what they look like, and I've been posting AI images of them, and that's what my brother is. That's what my brother's talking about.
yeah,
So
Han Lao is like I said, he's one of those you can see what he really looks like.
do you
I
have
don't
them
have
saved? Can you bring them up?
well that's yeah I don't have like you can see what he looks like in real life. Like there should be something on YouTube. Just type in Han Lao, and you'll come up with some stuff pretty quick. He's pretty popular now. Uh, One of the funny
okay,
things is I started calling his character Asian Bane. Uh, in the stories, he got rid of it and started wearing the Bane mask in videos. So I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, he's a really cool dude too. He's one of the great sense of
Yeah,
humor.
that's
Like you
exactly
look
what I'm
at him,
talking about. Like the AI.
Bass, relax for a second. Hold up. Question in
Go ahead.
chat:
Sorry.
Do we ever get to know more? Do we ever get to know anything else about the giant monster under LA?
um, yes, but probably not in the way that you're thinking. Uh, it'll come up before long, but probably not in the way you're expecting it to.
Okay, and then Azarath says temper helps me visualize Worstverse as a sitcom, but without the laughing audience and more eerie in between hilarious moments. Yeah, I could agree with that.
Yeah.
I can agree with that definitely. Um, up, 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 up. All right, so
So what'd you?
our,
There's one. Why'd you want
go ahead.
twins when it comes to Jose and his brother from New
Um,
York?
well, specifically, is I kind of wanted to show like some. Um, how even though you have these two people who are extremely similar from the beginning, like because it's hard to get more similar than identical twins, biologically speaking, environmentally speaking, and you can still get these kind of very differing paths. Uh, and like I said, a big overarching theme of this is like how families can come together and create this story. Like it's a throughout the theme of history, we tend to focus on stories where our families are a big part, a big driving force of that story. And so twins is a very interesting thing because it's very rare. It's very uncommon. Like identical twins is an extremely uncommon event. Uh, and it's uh, there's also another thing. It's like an early indicator um, for them being twins before it's ever even brought up is Travis in the worst hotel is how he can split his cudgel, his little weapon thing, in half and make a sword and shield. I'm like, wow, that's really rare. Not everybody can do this because there's
Mm-hmm.
only twins that do that. So you have that other factor there that's kind of a little tongue-in-cheek nod to the fact that he's a twin because he's able to do that and like split this thing off uh, and create two separate things out of it.
All right. I remember what my question was about when I was going to ask you to blink twice.
Oh, okay.
All right. At the end of the last story that Nature released, when Jose blacked out, seems to be a pattern going with this. Are we going to learn that Jose and Travis may have some kind of like paranormal in their blood or something like that?
Listen to the other
Or
stories
in their
played.
family history.
There's a lot of people who are way ahead of you on this in the Discord. If you're not in the Discord yet, get in there.
I got.
Um,
I'm gonna have to get it. I got Discord. I'm gonna have to get into the worst first one.
somebody will send you a link quicker than I can. But the other stories playlist on YouTube. If you ignored that playlist, you've missed out on huge parts of the story.
Well,
But
I ain't got nothing to do tomorrow. I ain't got nothing to do tomorrow. I'll know what I'm doing tomorrow. All right. So now is what? Yeah. All right. The hook. What now? Why go with the anticlimactic ending for him and Pan?
oh, because I think that's what everybody was expecting is some grand climax. This ultimate battle, this huge collision of forces. But the whole point was it being solved with non-conventional ways. Like in Hook's mind, all the way up to that point, that's how it was supposed to be. This grand battle of good versus evil, this apocalyptic event of, the Hook's crew versus the Lost Boys and clashing together. But Jose shows up and he's like, no, he just did corporate espionage. Do you know how seriously the U.S. government takes corporate espionage? So he calls up a friend who he went to college with, who's like a lawyer and who knows legal stuff, and he's like, "Hey, tell me everything you know about corporate espionage." And then boom, just snap of a finger, they know where Pan is. They've got him under control. Like that's kind of like a reference to how scary the U.S. government is when you mess with big business money. Like
Yeah.
that's the point of that is we think monsters are scary, but we live in the shadow of this kind of power every single day of our lives. So it was meant to be an anticlimactic thing where at the end Hook was thinking this all the time. That's what he was thinking about, but at the end he was just relieved that it was over. Is we build these things up in our mind like this is how it has to be. Um, it has to happen this way because this is where the story's going. The story has to because it's been building up to it. And that's not necessarily how things happen. Is we're expecting something to happen, and then it doesn't go the way we planned. And at the end of the day, like I said, he was tired. He's been doing this for almost 200 years.
Yeah.
He just wanted to be over. He didn't want to make some grand gesture of it or anything. This person needs to be dead so I can rest, and all of this comes to an end. So that's kind of how that was. It was more of a necessity than something else, because the climax was the battle at the mansion, not necessarily because that's something that you see happen throughout the course of the series. Is the climax isn't the very end of the story. The end of the story is how it winds down and then kind of passes into the next part of the story and picks back up, rather than trying to end everything on this grand climactic note. Is you just have this very tired, very beaten, very depressed man who just wants this thing to be over, because in his mind, like every minute he's not done this, Pan is out there doing more horrible things to people. So that was his goal, rather than his big climactic showdown was just at the end it has to be over, and that's all that really mattered.
Okay. A question about now in the Worstverse, Dracula lives in L.A. He's one of the most powerful beings in the Worstverse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now his castle,
Mm-hmm.
was it? Oh, now in the Worstverse, was it always there or was it moved there?
Moved it like you there's a reference to like how hard it is to actually get an entire castle underground. But that's largely what happens when he moves over there. Is they put the castle there and then build a foundation for the mansion over
Now,
on the castle.
when you put that in the story, was that? I thought it was a reference to say from dusk till dawn. Was that a reference? Was it kind of a reference from Dusk Till Dawn when the bar up top, and then when they scroll at the end of the movie, when they scroll out, it's the whole temple underneath?
Not really, but that is a great comparison, because I always thought that was a really cool idea. Is like having that bar on top of the pyramid. Like I say, well, it wasn't necessarily something I was thinking at the time, but that is a great comparison, because I always thought that was like one of my favorite things about that movie. Was always on top of this ancient pyramid the whole time, and you see like the piles of 18 wheelers and that like tossed off the sides. I always thought that was really cool.
Now, and in regards to Abia, you threw in there that Guillermo del Toro used her as the reference for the vampires in The Strain.
Well, that and like his vampires in general. Like I wanted something to where it made sense for this particular guy in the movie industry to be getting so close to what actual vampires did. Being the actual vampires in the Worstverse, like they exist in the Worstverse. How is this one guy, this one particular director, getting so close? Because it started. The original concept for that was Blade 2. He was behind the wheel of Blade 2, and I still prefer the Blade 2 vampires to the Strange vampires. There's something about them infinitely more terrifying. Uh, but yeah, you get this very organic, what he calls the organic vampire concept, rather than the magical vampire concept, and that's something that always stuck with me from a child watching Blade 2, Blade 1, Blade 2 when I was way too young to be watching Blade movies. But I always thought that was really cool. It made more sense than just vampires need blood. Why? So the, that movie made it really cool and something more biologically relevant to it, and something that made sense as far as like how an actual organism like that would be about doing things. So I wanted to, reference those things, but also be like, well, why are these things so close to these vampires in there? And just kind of doing that. Abigail's obsessed with the movie industry. Eventually, she's going to run into some people in there who have some sway in there. So I just thought that would be a cool little way to like reference Guillermo del Toro inside the universe.
Uh, um, I don't mind. Yeah, got a lot of people. So a lot of people, a few people in chat saying they're about to join the Discord server, as well. Am I? I'm about to join the Discord server too. Um, so the another interesting fact: the fact that the fact that in your story the government knows about the paranormal and they actually pay government subsidies to say like Dirty Work Inc. to take care of the say creatures that would have to eat humans.
Mhm.
I just that is a that's a nice little avenue to
Well,
go down.
it's a problem that like I said, one of the reasons I'm very skeptical in real life is like I wanted to take this and go, well, let's take our real world. I'm sitting here. Why don't I know about vampires right now? Why don't I know for a fact that vampires and werewolves and gods and all this crap is real? Like there would have to be something going on, a very grand orchestration to keep those things quiet. So how do we do that? How do we accomplish that? How do we keep those things a secret? And like I said, once you really iron out the possibilities, you're only left with a very narrow avenue of plausible explanations to that. Um, so you have to motivate them somehow to not parade up and down the street and cause all manners of trouble. But also, a lot of it comes from being left with the problem uh, that was essentially gifted to me by the original Cerber series, is because you have all these entities that are seemingly completely unemployed, who have no traceable means of income, paying ungodly amounts of money to be taxied around, you know, California. Where does that come from? It has to come from somewhere. So you have to work out a system like that takes into account why do we not see paranormals running around everywhere, and where does all this money come from? So you have to work within the confines of something that's already been established to explain that effectively. That would also pass in the real world. Why do we not see vampires running around? Why do we not see wood elves running around, or Dracula, or all these other things? Um, so you kind of have to work within those confines and make something that's believable. And money is, I mean, when is that not a great motivator?
Yeah, definitely. Now it it seems Sobek. We've talked about it. We brought him up. How you voiced Sobek. He's got his hands in a bunch of little pies, doesn't he?
Yep.
Like
I,
he's all over the place.
I really like the idea of so much of this being ran by a lizard person in the background. Like I always thought that's one of my favorite ridiculous conspiracy theories, like the Silurian hypothesis, the lizard people. So I was like, yeah, let's make the giant business mogul a lizard person. Just, but also, like I said, like Sobek, like it's cool. It loops back around to this level of consistency and continuity and how all these things are connected. Is you have the title of a god. It's all that's requisite to be a god in this universe is that you are worshipped as one. And Sobek was this thing that became worshipped as a god, and slowly built up wealth since the time of the pyramids. So you've got a lot of time to really diversify your portfolio after all that. But
Mhm.
I wanted him to be the antithesis of Adeline, really. And it's like I'm always telling people, you're not supposed to look up to her. She's not a good guy. She's not a protagonist. She's not a good character. Um, she's horrible. She's the stereotypical oligarch. Uh, she's she's exploiting these extremely disadvantaged communities to gain massive amounts of wealth, while also taking other disadvantaged people and putting them in this catastrophically harmful environment for profit. So I wanted Sobek to be, like I said, the antithesis of that. Is he sees this community and he's like, these people are getting screwed, and I want to do something with it. So a large part of like where monsters play is you see his workings in building up this community and kind of saving them from this thing that they've been kind of been pressed under for so long. Um, to where they have these things, they can go out and do stuff, they can go to theme parks, they can go shopping, they can go to school and do all this, because you have all these elements where he's like, I want to give you a full and fulfilling life. He's like, I've got money, he's like, I want to use it for something that's worthwhile, and you're presented it with it as like this like scary villainous thing, but he doesn't really do anything villainous. He scares Jose a little bit because of previous experiences, but he's meant to be like this more benevolent creature, but he's also less human looking. He's more alien to us in appearance, but he's more apt to do things more benevolently and selflessly than a character like Adeline is, who's just really exploiting the hell out of these people who don't have any other option.
Azrath says, "I'm happy Sufferer's Gold has finally been spoken about in the open."
Yeah, that took a long time to get around to.
Tom Talo says, I actually always kind of wondered what Adeline and Sobek were talking about when Jose runs into them talking in Adeline's building. Yeah, when he's bringing Madison when he's bringing Madison into the building.
Yeah, in my mind, that's part of like trying to build bridges on the surface while like subplotting her in the background. Like say she is the opposite of everything he wants to do. So he wants to ease her out of the area if at all possible. He wants to build his little paranormal utopia, and it's going to be really hard to do that with her in there. But at the same time, she could be a very formidable antagonist, like as far as a business sense goes, because that's the real obstacle and stuff like that is the bureaucracy and things that happen that can really set him back. So he doesn't want to burn that bridge immediately, but he's also not best buddies with Adeline at the same time. And you'll see that, like I said, that's something that sets something up for later on down the road that you can look back at and go, oh, that's what was happening there. Rather than just having to pull it out of nowhere later on and go, well, there's really no foundation for that. Is when you write stuff like that, it really helps to have something earlier on to build on. Like I said, like the Hook thing, but Hook's brother Ash is, as opposed to just like pulling that out of your ass all of a sudden at the end, you have stuff that you can see way back, that where he says in part 2 of Worst Hotel that his brother just set sail to the States. Mm-hmm. So you get that right there way back then, and you get these little breadcrumbs leading up to it. So that's something that's setting up events for later on in upcoming stories.
Now, in regards to Ash, Hook's brother, the dude that offed himself in front of Louis, was he like a major? Was he just a random help, or was he just?
I like to say that was basically Louis under a different set of conditions. Just some random goon who ended up falling into the paranormal world and ended up on the wrong side of things. Like that could have just as easily been Louis, given any different series of circumstances. Like Louis could have just in any different. Louis could have been a nameless grunt that ends up dead behind a warehouse somewhere.
Okay. Now the thing about it, doesn't Dirty Work Inc. rely on Cerber for a lot of their stuff on the legal level? I wonder if that's gonna frick Dirty Work Inc. at all if she's gone. Well, they Dirty Work Inc. only you really use the Cerber just to deliver the meat and stuff. Other than that, right? They're not really.
Yeah, it's a very easily replaceable service, especially when you have somebody with financial capabilities like Sobek. Like I said, he doesn't want, when you're doing something like that, you don't want to create this huge clash of opposing forces right off the bat. You want to build a structure underneath them that slowly rises and pushes them out to the side. over time rather than all of a sudden. Essentially like financial assassination. You don't want to just come out there and try and tear everything down all and take over, is you want to slowly build up a following or a customer base in this case, and then have them come over to your side. So like what Yahweh's strategy is, it's similar.
I was just thinking that. I was like, that's the arc that you're using. Is that the arc that you're using for the Yahweh character?
Yeah, so it's if it's true of one thing, true of the other. The strategy is sound. It's how you employ it. It's all strategy. Things like the Art of War or the Book of Five Rings. They'll all tell you that clashing forces is generally frowned upon. You don't want to do that. You want to outthink and outmaneuver your opponent in whatever case it might be. A good example is Miyamoto Musashi, the guy that wrote the Book of Five Rings. His last duel with Sasaki Tojo on Gangyo Island, he waited. He was intentionally late by a long period of time, specifically to fluster this guy, to get him mad and making mistakes, because that's good strategy. He's an extremely skilled samurai, and he wasn't sure if he could win under normal circumstances. So he's really late to piss him off. So you work with everything you have. So in this case, you don't want to create this opposing faction against Adeline, who has a massive financial capability behind it. So you just slowly ease her out of the area and take over, and it's harder to notice. It's the frog in boiling water, as they say. So you just slowly bring the water to a boil, and it never knows the water is boiling until it's too late. And so that's generally what you would want to try and do in any kind of scenario, whether you're Yahweh or Stovek or anything like that, is avoid opposition of forces and outthink and out-strategize whoever you're trying to overcome.
Now, you may have gotten into this on the Discord and the Patreon already, but is there a season 3 of Dirty Work Inc. coming?
Okay, so that's what I've been telling people, is I'm holding that ransom. My whole thing with Dirty Work Inc. is it was meant to be a bridge between seasons of I Ride for Cerber. And everybody's been asking me, is there going to be a season 3? And my thing is, I will do a season 3 if at some point I start making enough off this writing that I can say I do it part-time. Like if this becomes a full-fledged part-time thing, I'll do another season of Dirty Work Inc. I'll make the parts longer like I did for End of the Road. I'll do everything I possibly can. I said, but that's my goal on this one, is if I can do this, if I get to a point where I can do this shit part-time at least, then yeah, I'm holding that ransom for that particular thing. But I already have the plot. It's already there. I already know what I'm going to be doing, and it's already going to be set up by the end of that unified arc of everything. So you're already going to get an idea of what the plot would be. But it's there. The plot is there. It exists. The story outlines there. I already know what it would be. I don't even have to think about that. But that's what I have to have something in my pocket. Like I can't have all my cards on the table. I have to have something, to hold, ransom, to be like, hey, I really want to do this part-time, and you really want this certain thing. So here's how we come to an agreement here.
Let's see, writers, Azrath is on it, dude. Big fan. Writers still need to get paid what the risk is worth somehow. Also, to add incentive for discretion to prevent more Hunter BS.
Yeah.
I do like the fact that there aren't really going to be more Hunter interactions in this story, is there?
There are, but again, not in the capacity of like a Hunter story. Again, like I said, I've got this whole thing ironed out. I can't tell you how excited I am for this new set of stories, because it's so much has already been built up to it. But you'll see kind of the part that they play later on, because they still exist. They would still be a thing. It's like I said, it's something taken to its logical conclusion. You have paranormals, you have shows about people hunting and killing paranormals, and you have an industry that invites regular human beings directly into contact with paranormal. Some of those are going to be those people who watch those shows, and another percentage of those are going to be people who it gets good to go and hunt these creatures. So it's a logical conclusion you have to draw from the circumstances. They're going to be there. How do we deal with them? So that's kind of you're still going to see them, but they're going to serve a purpose that I think, like I said, like you'll enjoy. Like I said, if you're sick of the hunter stories, like I am, you'll enjoy the purpose that they come to play later on in these new series.
So, are we going to see more of the characters from the from Werewolves Are Assholes, like their detective force, their private investigator team that they started?
Under the right conditions, yes, without giving too much away, under the right circumstances, you will. Again, like the stories where they're set is what's going to dictate who you're able to see more throughout these new upcoming series. They'll be present for this last arc, the combined arc. But given the nature of the new series and where they're set and how they take place, like Tales of Haley Handiwork, like I was talking about, doesn't take place in any one given place or any one given time. It takes place over the course of many years, almost 20 years. So, and not in any one single place. So you'll kind of see how that happens, but that doesn't give you a lot of opportunity to run into those characters or any of the other existing characters that you're familiar with. But in circumstances like the characters from My Right for Server and Dirty Work Inc. and Worst Hotel, they're going to be in proximity to that, so you'll have more opportunity to see them as those stories progress. But given the right circumstances, you would have another opportunity to see the cast of Werewolves Are Assholes again. But like I said, only under the right series of circumstances.
Okay.
Now, are you going to bring any of the cryptid world into the paranormal, such as Bigfoot, Dogman? Well, Dogman you already covered with werewolves, but Jersey Devil, Loch Ness monsters, things like that.
To a certain, like I count kind of things like the goblins as cryptids. Like when you consider the appearance of the goblins, you have an explanation for so many different descriptions of cryptids, especially like the chupacabra, which and then you have things. Okay, I take it back. You do have one. I forgot. I haven't thought about it for a while. Danny is the goat man. You have a cryptid.
I forgot about him.
Yeah, you have Goatman, and that was, like I said, that was a reference to one of the greatest creepypastas ever written. If you've never listened to a Nazi's Goatman story, really, and one of the cool things about it, you have no idea who wrote it. It was so that's a really cool part of the pasta story. It one delve into, you have no idea who wrote a Nazi Goatman story. That's one thing. Add that little extra dimension.
Now, do you get a lot of your inspiration from the vampires, the werewolves, and everything, mostly from creepypasta, or do you get it from uh, possible encounters that people's had over the past few hundred years from books and stuff like that?
I take it's parsed out. I wouldn't say I get a lot of it from like creepypastas, but at the same time, it's just depending on what you define as a creepypasta. Because I have these scripts for shorts that I've written about like Dracula and the Time Machine. They're written as we would describe like Dracula. If you've never read the original Dracula novel, it's written as a collection of novels, or not novels, but as a collection of diaries, journals, captain's logs, records, things like that we would describe today as a creepypasta. It's told the same way we would tell a creepypasta today. It's virtually identical, really. So, I mean, we have this book that's, well over 100 years old that was essentially the original creepypasta because it's written identical to how we would do it today. Um, so you kind of have that where what really is a creepypasta and what isn't. But a lot of it, like I said, is considering things like biology, physics, what can and can't be done. Like Dr. Creepin started doing. As soon as he started that, I was like, oh god, I really have to get all this lined up. So I had all the physics lined out because that's when people always ask me, well, what do I need to do if I want to try and write something canonical to these stories? Like, you're going to lose some sleep because we start the conversation with standard model physics, biology, phylogeny, monophyly, particle. Like, it gets so complicated so fast. We start talking about particles, and then we get into quantum physics and quantum mechanics more and more. I have to say. And cellular biology and crap like that. Like, it all files together. There's more of a ground up work than top down. So it how these things would really function in real life tends to dictate how I come up with them more so than I come up with them and then try and figure out a way to make them work. So like I said, like the vampires is, well, how do we get these things? How do we get extra strength, extra healing factors, new biology? You need something there that can do this. That's very complicated on like a biological level. But even beyond that, like how do you get that biology? Well, you have to go down further into like the atomic level and into particle physics and things like that, and then it gets really complicated. So I build these things from the ground up, and sometimes they do bear a lot more resemblance to things we're familiar with. But I'll throw things out if I can't get beyond the explanation of because magic, I throw it out and don't do it. So that tends to be kind of my driving force rather than trying to reference anything directly as far as creating something within the confines of the story. I want it all to flow together. So if I just take something random and throw it in there, it would stand out a lot more than trying to build it all from the ground up.
Okay. Now, see how to phrase this.
Tom, what? Tantalo. Tantalo says Dracula was the first creepypasta. That is one of the biggest revelations that isn't part of the Worstverse.
Yeah, if you actually go back, but at the same time, the time is pretty close because I have another one. If like you could call, I mean, I could go on forever about the time, but it's told not by the protagonist of the story, but by somebody recounting the tale of the protagonist. So it's time travel. He's telling this group of people this story, and then one of these people among them, who's a journalist, is telling us the story that he heard from the time traveler who never actually did his name, listening to the story of the time traveler being told to people that not heard it. So you have this other this element of separation that we would also associate with creepypasta. Hey, somebody told me this story one time about the thing that happened to somebody, and that's basically how the time machine is told. But in this case, we have something that literally predates the radio. Like the time machine was published about a year before the radio was patented. So, I mean, that was a very revolutionary story for its time.
Yeah. Now, are you a big believer in the paranormal and cryptid world?
I'm not convinced. I was telling Truth earlier is I'm very skeptical. I don't say that the paranormal or the supernatural is impossible, but firstly, it's very difficult. Now you're talking about something outside of nature, and the best way found so far to determine what is true and what isn't is methodological naturalism, which deals exclusively with things in the natural world. So if something is supernatural and it's not part of nature, then how do we investigate it? How do we determine the truth of it or the validity of the claims? And that becomes very difficult. So you have to start saying, well, just not being able to explain something at the time is not necessarily indicative of something being supernatural or paranormal, because for a long time we attributed sun to a god literally pushing it across the sky until we discovered that it wasn't. So we have to be careful about what we assign the descriptors of like supernatural to, just in absence of an explanation with the knowledge.
Right.
Always very skeptical about any kind of things like that. Like I even have things in my own life that I can't immediately explain, but me not having an immediate explanation isn't something to say, well, that definitely. So I'm skeptical about things like that.
Yeah, because
All right. So, one second. I finally got what my brother was trying to get me to show. So give me 1 second here to load this up. Come on, load up. Azrath said, I often envision Pete and Leslie as Beavis and Butthead, especially with Leslie has a flamethrower. So, what was there any specific people you base Pete and Leslie on?
Oh God, just unmotivated, dude, bro, that you see behind a counter anywhere you've ever walked into. Like anytime you walk into a store and you're like, oh, this is going to be an ordeal trying to communicate faces. But yeah, I would say Beavis and Butthead, great comparison. Is there just these two people that you just look at and go, I just don't want to deal with this today. And that's essentially what drives their characters. Is you have, Leslie, which is the kind of the know-it-all nerdy guy, and you have Pete, which is like, oh God, please leave me alone. Like that person you meet and immediately dislike, and you can't even tell why. It's like, I don't like anything about you. You bug me on a fundamental level. That's kind of the inspiration behind those two, is just placeholders for those people that we encounter on our day-to-day life.
well, it's like also if you think how Abigail and
He actually
Jose
show
are
you some of
together, the way he treats her, it's almost like a big brother. And for her, the way when he's in trouble, she's the first one to go after and try and find him, help him out, because he doesn't treat her as a kid, but yet he treats her like a bro, like he's a big brother to her,
Yeah. Well, that's the
and
thing.
she loves him for it.
Yeah, is you have to consider, like I said, Abigail's like one of the more complex characters in the story, is because when you consider what frame of reference could we possibly have in our lived experiences that could compare to what she's been through in her life. And then she comes out of that, and like you found out like here recently, she's just been kind of off by herself for a while, like just on the fringes of this community, not really interacting with too many people. People only show up when they need her for something and then disappear again. And then you have this guy coming in just out of nowhere, who walks into this business and doesn't give a shit about all the paranormal hoo-ha or the fact that she's a vampire or however old she is or what she looks. She has these cool props from these movies that he loves, and he starts geeking out about it in front of her and shares this passion with this thing that she loves so much that she builds a business around. You're going to be like, oh wow, a person I can actually connect to. And then he starts to like bring her out of her shell, and she starts to connect and interact with everybody else. So that's her tie. That's like her tether to everybody else at this point.
Tantalo said, is this when we learn all of the Worstverse was inspired by the Boondocks quote, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence? Let's see. Tactical Weave says the real Pete and Leslie were the friends we met along the way. He especially won her a baseball game for crom's sake. Yeah. Yeah, the dynamic between Abigail and Jose is actually pretty. It's actually pretty cool because when he gets kidnapped, she like flips out.
Yeah, she you see her kind of keeping it together for a while, like she keeps her composure, and you can kind of see her befriending Jose, but not wanting it to really slip. You know that
Yeah,
they're putting this dynamic. You kind of see, hey, they've got their own thing. Like, part of why I like their dynamic is I like being able to, like, I don't get me wrong, I love romance arc. You sit me down with a good slice of life anime, oh, I'm happy, I'm content. But at the same time, I want to do something that's a guy interacting with a girl that's not a romantic interest. It's literally real deep budding because we have these two things in the inquiry. We have the romantic interest between like a male and female, and then we have the kind of that arm's length friendship. But I want that like really deep bonded friendship that you could see, like you only typically see either with a girl or a guy and a guy, but between these two who like have this shared go through a lot together and like have this real connection with each other that isn't built on a romantic level. And that's why even Destiny mentioned it. She's like, no, I think if we had met first, this would have been a very different scenario. It might have ended up being that, but at the same time, they still have this shared they bond over. Where they have actual connection that isn't based on anything romantic at all. And that's something that I really do with writing. Bring something weird and different and fun.
So now, how did you develop? What was your theory of developing Relic, the Manager, and Mister Jiggles?
Well, I kind of wanted to do essentially three different elements of like kind of like a. So there's if you like I'm a frequenter in the apologetics debate scene, and one of the things that comes up a lot is the argument from consciousness is how do we explain consciousness unless there's this higher being. And it's not like I hate the idea or I'm just like I don't like this, so I'm going to argue against it. I just tell people I don't see any evidence that consciousness is anything other than an emergent property of a physical brain. But when I did the Worstverse, I'm like, screw that. Let's make this universe where we assume that consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, of reality. So where these reality essences themselves can gain consciousness, and each of them is slightly different. Like you kind of see their individual quality. The manager represents like creation, like origin, like you see him as he is. He's part of the fundamental creation of the universe. That's why he's always coming out of a wall. His appearance is determined by whatever his background is. The Iglesia, who is a fighter, like he trains people to fight. He's like the element of destruction in the universe. Like he's a destructive force. And then you have Relic, who is like they describe him as like the background radiation. You can consider him like the quantum functions of the universe on a large scale, which is like I said, how Dr. Jekyll like kind of figures out, hey, he can travel. It has to be some kind of quantum function. Is because he essentially represents like the quantum foam or the quantum web that we're all a product of. Like when you get to these very going into quantum mechanics, and I know it's a big leap here, but there's essentially these quantum fields. This is the basis of quantum mechanics. There's quantum fields, and everything that we experience are excitations in this quantum field. That as you
One second, my kid.
reality, you get particles and things like that. That tends to be like what Relic is basically is a representation of like the quantum functions of the universe.
Okay. Yes,
Sorry about that. My son opened my door. Where's my Switch at? It's upstairs, dude. Go away.
I've been terrified my cat's going to run across and knock everything off again. I was doing a writing class like last week. My cat just jumped up and grabbed the
All right. So, dude, just guys, like I said, if you haven't listened to the Worstverse, you need to go. We dropped, I believe, Wilcut dropped the link to Josh's channel and the Worstverse in the chat. Go click it and start it from the beginning. Listen to it in listen order. Don't miss any parts. I highly recommend it. Putting around the house, cleaning, something like that, throw it on there and play it loud because it's really good.
Yeah, it's you cannot listen to this closely enough. It like I'm sure that it's like a mantra for me at this point in the Discord. They're always making fun of me for it, but small details matter. There is no detail too small to pass over because it can something is minute as something that a character is eating, or an offhanded remark can give away this huge thing later on down the road. And if you miss it, then you might skip this entire huge plot point that you don't get to figure out until much later on because you missed that point. But that's kind of the thing that they're always making fun of me for in the Discord is like anytime they're going through the theories and stuff and I'm trying to like nudge them in the right way, I'm always like trying to tell them small details matter. Because like I was saying earlier, is I started this like writing thing, doing like mystery stuff, detective stuff, things like that. And because that was always a very complex and what I thought to be a challenging form of writing. So that's what I wanted to try and do. But then I was like, well, I want to do this horror thing and comedy and I was like, mystery has to come with me. There has to be. It's too fun of an element to leave behind. So there's always that element. Like I said, if you're not listening to these, if you're not reading these like you would a mystery novel, you're probably going to miss a lot of stuff that you otherwise might not have. So it any tiny detail, any small little detail might help you throughout the course of it.
So, apart from the Worstverse, how long have you actually been writing?
I think the first thing, as stupid as it sounds, and normally you wouldn't be able to waterboard this out of me, but one of the first things I remember writing is an Avatar: The Last Airbender fan fiction in like middle or high school, I think. Because we were just talking about it and I was talking about ideas like, oh, well, if we kept going through the story, this is what I do. And my buddy was like, dude, you should write that. That sounds really cool. So I grabbed a notebook and filled up this entire, spiral notebook full of it. I'm like, hey, that's pretty all right. Like he thought I thought it was going to be stupid. He says, but I was like, oh, okay. And then kind of put it off. But then I just, it's something that I discovered was really therapeutic and kind of helped, take my mind off things. So just anytime I had a chance, I would write like this little quick mystery or something, or just most of them. The laptop I had a lot of it on died years ago, so it'll never see the light of day again. But there's God, I don't know how many years, but yeah, like back in like early high school, I remember like eighth or ninth grade, that I wrote outside of a school assignment, really. So that's about how long I've actually been writing, but I really only started actually like uploading stuff like when the Worstverse started, like about 5.5 years ago. Because like and like it's one of those things. I was like in a really dark place and just like depressed and all kinds of crap. And that's why I tell people, I say Abigail's the oldest character in the Worstverse. She predates the Worstverse. Harley is the most important character in the Worstverse. Because without her, you don't get the Worstverse. Because the only reason I really started getting serious about writing that concept is Harley was my ex. And when she broke up with me, it depressed me really, really bad. And I started writing to take my mind off of it. And that's how you ended up getting the Worstverse, is through that whole thing. So that's kind of how that all progressed. And so without her, you don't even get the Worstverse. I would have never really buckled down and started doing it at the time. So that's how that all kind of came around full circle. Is I had this laptop. I bought a bunch of laptops for like $20 from this lady in a box, and this one was like locked and you couldn't get into it, so I had to like wipe it and completely redo it. And I just, because my old one had died, I didn't have a laptop or anything, and so I just started writing on it, and that's how that came about. Was just I needed something, anything to take my mind off of it. Because I mean, when I say I was in a bad place, I was in a bad place. Like I would be taking business calls and have to stop, like breaking down, just in tears, and take the business call, hang up, and just break down again. So without that, we would have never got the whole Worstverse thing. So that's kind of how that started about 5.5 years ago.
Tactical Weeb said we're down here playing checkers and Josh writing is like he's playing Dark Souls or Animal Crossing.
Oh.
Tantalo said Worstverse definitely has gotten him listening, got him into more literature. I like this comment right here. Joshua, the jokes you hide in your stories kill me, and Scott is the best for delivery on them. Milk shooting tens of feet out of my nose.
Yeah.
I can't imagine like doing the English narration with anybody other than Scott, because aside from him being able to do the voices, what's more important, I would say, is he can read the tone of what's being written, which is so much more important. I just, like, if I have a certain voice in mind, I'll tell him. I'll be like, Athena, is it a female version of Jason Isaac's character from The Patriot? So Tavington, if you've never seen it, does it. That cadence, that voice pattern, that accent, female version, and just turn him loose. Like Louis, I said, Joe Pesci, my cousin Vinny. That specific performance, I said, my cousin Vinny, Joe Pesci, there's Louis. And then just turn him loose with it, because I know if I give him the voice, everything else he'll be able to figure out, and I won't have to worry about it. So that's so, as important as the voices are, him being able to read the tone of the story without me having to tell him, because we're kind of on that same level at this point, is invaluable. I can't describe how important that is.
And then I do like the parts that you wrote him into the story. That's pretty awesome.
Well, I didn't start that. That was Mo Fuchsia's, and I wanted to make that make more sense, and I really wanted to hammer home like what those stories do for people, like what it, like the sense of consistency and relief that his stories really do for people. Because I think it's easy when you're in the hustle and minutia of it to forget that, but like he does so much good for so many people with these narrations and stuff, and how much he helps them. That's like, no, that's important. That's worth addressing more than anything. I really wanted to hammer that home and make that a key element of the story.
Oh, yeah, because definitely some people might be having a day where they might find the worst hotel. They'll put on some Nature's Temperament and just mellow out. Azrath P is stored in the balls.
And that's another thing, is to Scott's credit, if it's on the page, he narrates it. Dr. Creepin, he that part, for whatever reason, made him so uncomfortable, he left it out of the narration. Scott Soldier too, if it's in there, even if it makes him horribly uncomfortable,
if it's in there, it's in there for a reason.
Yeah, that's extremely important to me, especially with like the current state of YouTube. Is somebody who's that genuine, who will narrate whatever is in there, however it is so important to me, as far as creating any kind of artistic endeavor.
Temper's delivery for Thor's story in Cerber got me emotional. That's what Azrath said. I don't know if you've listened to his Burning Down the Ozarks one that he narrated. That's a really good one. But
yeah, I've been subscribed to him for so long now. I still remember the one that got me hooked. The story itself, it was a story, but the voice, what he did for that story, I was like, oh no, I'm immediately subscribed. It was what was it? If you hear this sound, quickly and quietly take your own life. Old story, way back. The voice he did for that monster sent chills down my spine. Two stories have done that. Is that one and Mr. Creepypasta's My Dog Was Lost for 3 days. When he did that dog's voice, holy shit. Like two of the, as far as the what the voice acting adds to the story, those are two of the best examples I can think of, because they sent chills down my spine. So yeah, if you're newer to Scott's channel, go back and find that one. If you hear this sound, quickly and quietly take your life. That voice that he did is terrifying. Oh my god.
I think the first one that really put me on to Scott Nature's Temper was I'm an immortal, but not of my own free will.
Yes.
It was like a vampire angel story. That one was I was like, wow, that was a really good total story.
Actually, the one that got me on Dr. Creepy, the very first one, it was I think it's called A Word of Warning or A Word of Caution. And it's a vampire story, and oh, it was really good. Very unique. It was told from the perspective of the vampire. Crazy story. I really loved that one. That one always stood out in my head. I still go back and listen to it every now and then because I got it saved somewhere, but I can't remember the exact title. Either A Word of Caution or A Word of Warning. Great story, brilliantly written. I really love that one.
Tactical Weeb says, so what the moral of that is, dare I say, the devil's in the details? Yes. That's why I'm on my second and a half time of listening to the Worstverse, because the little details that I've missed previous times going through it, because you hear it and you're like, oh, that makes sense now. I didn't hear that before. Like when I first got turned on Dirty Work Inc., I loved it, but at the same time, I'm like, what the hell is going on? I had no idea of the whole overlaying universe that was Dirty Work, part of that Dirty Work Inc. was part of.
Yeah,
and then you start hearing the rest of the stories, and you're like, okay, that makes sense now. You know, that makes sense. Put into it, yeah.
Yeah, that's something I noticed is a lot of people like started listening to Dirty Work Inc. and I'm like, you passed over all of the series that leads up to it. So you have to, if you want to get the full picture, but that's kind of the utility of a series like that, is you have all these stories that funnel listeners into this web of other stories. So this story existing over here will get more views on this story over here as kind of an intermingling network kind of thing. But they have to work together, because I think that's, people always tell me, like I said, I don't, that was the thing I wasn't expecting when I started this. All the people who come to me asking me about writing advice and stuff, because at the beginning I was like, I don't know, I'm just writing. I don't know how I do it, I'm just doing it. So I had to like break down all this stuff and figure out what I was doing and how I was doing it and being able to explain. But all these people coming to me and telling me about this stuff, they all want to do a series. That's their thing. Is I'm writing a series. I'm like, hold on. I said, start being able to write a story, one part, beginning, middle, and end. Conclude it. Learn how to end a story before you tell a continuing story. Because like they want that. Like I think that there's more prestige in writing a series like this than actually exists. And you're still the same dude sitting in your underwear watching South Park, typing on a laptop. Nothing changes. Nothing. That's what I'm always telling people. I'm like, dude, I am a guy writing stories on the internet. If you are a fan of anything, be a fan of the stories, not of me, because there is nothing special there. I am the same jackass that I was when I started writing these stories. Nothing has changed for me. Nothing will change for you. Write because you enjoy writing and because you have a passion for what you're writing, but you have to start being able to begin, tell, and end a story before you can even start. Because, like I said, it seems like that's what I did, because I started with Werewolves Are Assholes and this whole series broke. But I wrote hundreds of stories before I ever posted this online, to where I understood what I was doing before I ever tried to post anything online. But you're trying to run before you walk. Like you have to be able to tell a complete story. Like, because that's what I'm always harping on people who get online and talk about, well, I'm so sick of all these stories just suddenly ending. I'm like, well, there's a bunch of reasons for that. I'm like, first of all, they started writing a series with no idea how it was going to end. What they thought was going to happen when they started writing the series, like they didn't like explode into fame and stardom and started making big bucks and stuff. Doesn't happen. Like, I make a couple $100 on Patreon, and that took 5.5 years to do. Like, what they think is going to happen is not what actually happens. It's something you have to do because you enjoy it and for no other reason. And they have this idea in their head of, oh, if I can write this series and it gets really popular, it's like all that means is you wrote a series and it got really popular. That's all that happened.
Yeah.
Nothing changes. Just learn to tell a story, and more importantly, learn to enjoy telling that story. That's what it's all about. Because if you're trying to write stories on YouTube to get famous, you are in the wrong field, my friend. It's just, that's not what happens. Like, I write this stuff because I really enjoy writing it and I love it, and it's challenging for me, and it's something that, you know, occupies me. You know, we all have to do stuff until the day we die, and this is what I enjoy doing. So
Yeah, like that's exactly why I felt the need to reach out to you, because I enjoyed the stories so much that I wanted to kind of like pick your brain about how you came about writing these stories and the development and and everything like that. So, like, again, thank you for coming on and sharing with us.
yeah, like you said, when you showed us, it sounded, you know, like a fun thing to do. Like, you know, just, you know, this part of, you know, having fun with it is being able to do stuff like this, because, you know, it's like a sample of living the dream, like, oh, being invited on a talk show or something, but, you know, smaller scale. And, you know, that's the fun part of it, is people actually care what you think, and for a minute that actually does feel really good for a little while. But
Tactical Weeb says, and unlike sometimes in school, Josh's required reading is actually required, or you're going to be lost as hell. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Right. Completely agree.
one of the things I really want to do is I really wanted to start like a not necessarily a book club, but like a story club. Like the medium of the story doesn't matter. A series, a cartoon, a movie, a book. But we all take in that story and then talk about it, and then, you know, examine the themes and stuff, and really kind of understand, because that's what I tell people when they're asking me, well, how do I learn how to write? And I'm like, try the same way I did, is learn from the people who write the way you want to write. Like John Abid Linguist, the guy who wrote Let the Right One In. I've got several, like, I love his work so much. I have several copies of Let the Right One In, the sequel to it. I read the Time Machine, H.G. Wells stuff over and over again. I have a book with all of Bram Stoker's horror novels in it. It's like that saying, if I've seen far, it's only because I've stood on the shoulders of a giant. I learned from the people who I looked at and thought, they're doing what I want to do. So you learn to analyze stuff and learn from that. Learn from other stuff will teach you how to write the way you want to write a lot better than I can teach you to write the way I write, because that might not necessarily be exactly the same way you want to write. We all have different preferences and styles. The goal should be to write a story that ultimately you're happy with. So learn to examine these things, to break them down and learn from them, and you'll eventually get to where you want to be.
So, we have a question from Tantalo. On that note, aside from Jurassic Park, what 5 books does Josh recommend?
Oh God, yeah. Aside from Jurassic Park, so Let the Right One In, obviously one of the best modern horror novels. The Time Machine is one you can't pass up. One of the most revolutionary science fiction and horror novels ever written. Obviously Dracula, you can't pass up Dracula. I really have to make the list.
Boy, anything Jules Verne.
Jules Verne's pretty good, absolutely. God, run out of spaces. Uh, hmm. Okay, I've got one, and it's okay. Two. I've got my last two. So, uh, it's more of a series, but the Fablehaven series is one of those young adult books that punches way above its class. Uh, tells a great one of the scariest scenes I've ever seen written is in the first volume of Fablehaven. Holy shit! What a scare! I tell people go read that if you want to read and learn how to write a terrifying scene. And there's another one called Atlantis. I have it here somewhere.
Wait a minute.
It's my Uncle Tommy, who is a Vietnam vet, gave me this book to read a long time ago. And it's by a guy named Greg Donnick. And it's absolutely insane. Like, he's a very well researched writer. He's one of those people who really dug into the grit and grime of the kind of story he was telling. It's about like the Bermuda Triangle and the pyramids and all these ancient temples in like Cambodia and stuff like that. Brilliant book. If you've never read Atlantis, this is it's such a great science fiction novel. But yeah, those would be the ones I really recommend. Is like Let the Right One In. Long book, but good. And there's so much in it that you don't see in like the adaptations. So Let the Right One In, Time Machine, Dracula, Fablehaven, and Atlantis. Great books. Absolutely great book.
There you go, Tantalo. What the hell is that? My cat? What the hell is going on here? I keep hearing shit. Close my door. All right. So
It's Abigail trying to get in.
Yeah. I didn't even see no Abigail. I need one of those things to keep me busy with Jurassic Park. All right, so we've been going 3 hours. I don't want to burn you out, Josh. So I think we're going to have to end this one. But if you hang on for a little bit after we end it, well, we'll shoot the shit for a couple minutes afterwards. Okay?
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So everybody, thank you again. I want to thank Josh again for coming on and talking to us about the Worstverse, which is fucking awesome. All right, I'm gonna say it. If you have not, I highly recommend going back and listening to it, guys, from beginning to end. And subscribe to Josh's channel. It's Joshua Waggoner 90. And he has the playlist every time a new story is uploaded, it hits that playlist. So make sure you hit your subscribe, get your notifications up on his channel. Want to thank him again for coming on and talking to us about the Worstverse. Wilcott, thanks again for joining us. All you guys that came over and had sat and chat and listened to us rant and rave about this. Thank you. Anybody new listeners, thank you for coming over and watching, joining us from Reddit. It's it's 11:40. I'm not. Now we ain't gonna do a rumble tonight. I don't feel like doing a rumble tonight. I'm gonna go upstairs and smoke some weed. I didn't say that out loud, did I? But everybody, thanks again for joining us on tonight's episode of Into the Worstverse with Joshua Waggoner, and we will see you on the next one, guys. So take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Later, everybody.